Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I was in the hallway when I felt it, a low vibration in the floorboards beneath my feet, not loud but intentional. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole, no one there. I opened it slowly. The doorbell button was lit up, still glowing, but it never made a sound, no chime, no echo. On the welcome mat, someone had placed a small folded napkin. Inside was a house key identical to mine, except for one deep scratch across the top. That was 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks since my neighbor disappeared without explanation, leaving behind only questions that multiplied like shadows at dusk. The police filed their report, missing person, no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, case shelved within days. But I knew something was wrong. I had been watching her house through my kitchen window every morning while brewing coffee. Same routine for 2 years. She would leave at the same time, wearing that faded blue jacket, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than both of us. The morning she vanished, I saw her shadow move past the window, but she never came out the front door. I kept the scratched key in my pocket, turning it over between my fingers whenever doubt crept in. The metal was warm against my palm, smooth except for that deliberate mark. Someone wanted me to have it, someone who knew exactly which key would unlock my door. The first time I used it to enter her house, my hands shook so violently I nearly dropped it. The lock turned easily, too easily. Inside, everything appeared normal. Coffee cup on the counter, half empty. Newspaper folded to the crossword puzzle, 3 words filled in. Her reading glasses balanced on the armrest of a chair that still held the impression of her body. But something was missing. I walked through each room twice before I realized what it was. No dust, nowhere. Every surface gleamed as if someone had been cleaning regularly. Yet the house felt abandoned, filled with that particular silence that comes after life has left a place. In her bedroom, I found the first real clue, a small digital recorder tucked beneath her pillow. When I pressed play, her voice emerged, clear but strained. She spoke about feeling watched, about finding things moved in her house, about a car that parked across the street for hours, always empty when she looked directly at it. Her voice grew more agitated as the recordings progressed. She mentioned seeing someone in her backyard, someone who looked familiar but shouldn't have been there, someone she trusted once. The final recording cut off mid-sentence, her words dissolving into static. I took the recorder home and listened to those files until I could recite them. In the background of several recordings, I began to notice sounds I had missed before. A door closing softly, footsteps on carpet, the subtle creak of floorboards under careful weight. Someone else had been in that house while she recorded. The realization hit me during the 4th listen. Those footsteps matched a rhythm I knew. I had heard them before in my own hallway, late at night when I assumed the old building was simply settling. But buildings don't walk with such measured steps. Buildings don't pause outside bedroom doors. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. The mailman who always seemed to linger near her mailbox longer than necessary. The maintenance worker who appeared every few days to repair things that didn't look broken. The woman from the apartment upstairs who asked too many questions about whether I had seen anyone unusual. Each conversation felt rehearsed. Their concerns seemed genuine, but their questions were too specific. They wanted to know what I knew. They wanted to gauge how much I had observed. Most importantly, they wanted to know if I had been inside her house. I lied to all of them. Instinct told me that admitting to having the key would be dangerous. Instead, I played the role of concerned neighbor, offering just enough information to seem helpful while revealing nothing substantial. But someone knew I was lying. Someone knew about the key. The proof came when I returned to her house for the third time. The recorder was gone. In its place, someone had left a photograph. It showed me standing in her kitchen, holding the recorder to my ear. The image was taken from outside through the window with a telephoto lens. On the back, someone had written a single word in her handwriting: "Stop." I should have listened. I should have returned the key and forgotten everything I had discovered. Instead, I became obsessed with understanding who had taken that photograph and why they wanted me to abandon my investigation. I installed a small camera in my window aimed at her front door. For days, nothing unusual appeared on the footage. Then one morning, I caught something that made my blood freeze: a figure approaching her door using a key to enter. The person moved with casual familiarity, as if they belonged there. When I enhanced the image, I saw a face I recognized, someone I trusted, someone who had asked me about her disappearance with what I now realized was mock concern. Someone who had been cleaning her house, maintaining the illusion that she might return. The truth was simple and horrifying. She hadn't disappeared suddenly. She had been planning to leave, probably to escape someone who had been stalking her, watching her, entering her home while she slept. But before she could execute her plan, that someone had stopped her. The scratched key wasn't meant to help me solve a mystery. It was meant to make me complicit in covering one up. By entering her house, by moving through her private spaces, I had contaminated whatever evidence might have existed. I had become part of the problem without realizing it. Now I understand why the doorbell never made a sound. It had been disabled. Someone needed to enter houses silently, to move through lives without announcement. Someone who knew that most people don't look carefully at familiar faces, don't question the presence of someone who seems to belong. I still carry the scratched key. Not because I plan to use it again, but because throwing it away feels like abandoning her completely. Sometimes I catch myself looking through my kitchen window, expecting to see her blue jacket, her measured walk to the street. Instead, I see other neighbors going about their routines. I see the mailman, the maintenance worker, the woman from upstairs. I see all the people who ask me questions about her disappearance, and I wonder how many of them are still watching, how many of them know exactly what happened to her. The police file remains closed, the case stays shelved, but every morning when I look through that window, I remember her voice on those recordings. I remember her fear, and I know that somewhere, someone is still cleaning houses that should be gathering dust. Someone is still disabling doorbells and leaving keys for the next concerned neighbor to find. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just makes you another witness to silence. Crime 2, I was trying to measure the guest room when I noticed the wall felt off. The tape said 10 feet, but I knew it should have been 12. I tapped the wall, hollow. I knocked around the corner, solid. That space shouldn't exist. I dragged a chair over, stood on it, and peeled the wallpaper back. Behind it, faint outlines of a sealed door, no handle, no hinges, just lines carved into plaster. And in one corner, a smear of something dark, dried, shaped like a fingerprint. The house had been my aunt's. She left it to me after passing quietly in her sleep, or so everyone said. I'd spent summers here as a child, running through these same rooms, but I never noticed anything strange about the guest room wall. Maybe children don't pay attention to architecture. Maybe adults don't either, until they're forced to. I pressed my ear against the hollow space. Nothing, just the sound of my own breathing, magnified and strange. The smell hit me then, not decay, not rot, but something metallic and stale, like old coins left in a closed drawer. My fingers traced the sealed edges, feeling where someone had carefully plastered over what used to be an opening. The work was professional, deliberate. Someone wanted this space forgotten. I called the contractor who'd worked on the house before my aunt moved in. He remembered the job, a simple renovation, he said, nothing unusual, but when I described the sealed door, his voice changed. He cleared his throat, paused longer than necessary. He mentioned that my aunt had been very specific about certain modifications, very specific about privacy. He wouldn't elaborate, just said some clients have particular needs. The local records office had blueprints from when the house was built. The original floor plan showed what I suspected, a small room behind that wall, maybe 6 by 8 feet, marked as storage. But on the renovation plans, the space simply wasn't there anymore, like it had been erased from existence. The clerk who helped me find the documents seemed nervous when I asked about modifications. She kept glancing toward the door as if someone might be listening. I spent the evening studying both sets of plans, measuring and remeasuring. The math was simple. Someone had stolen 6 feet of space from reality and covered it up so carefully that even I, who'd grown up in this house, never noticed. The question wasn't how, it was why. My aunt had been a quiet woman, the kind who kept her curtains drawn and her conversations short. Neighbors described her as polite but distant. She worked from home, something to do with bookkeeping, though no one could say exactly for whom. She ordered groceries online, rarely entertained visitors, and when she did speak to people, it was always pleasant and forgettable. But there were things I remembered from childhood visits that seemed different now. How she always insisted I sleep in the front bedroom, never the guest room. How she'd get nervous when I played too close to that particular wall. How she'd distract me with snacks or television whenever I got curious about the house's layout. I thought she was just being protective. Now I wondered if she was being protective of something else. I found her personal effects in the attic. Boxes of papers, photographs, old bills. Most of it was ordinary utility payments, insurance documents, medical records. But buried beneath bank statements, I found a folder marked with just an address. Not this address. An address across town, in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The house at that address was small, run-down, with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for months. I drove by several times before working up the courage to look closer. The realtor's lockbox hung loose on the front door. The yard was overgrown, the windows dark. It felt abandoned, but in a deliberate way, like someone had simply walked away and never looked back. I called the number on the sign. The realtor sounded tired when she answered, like she'd been expecting bad news. She said the property had been difficult to sell. Previous owner had disappeared, leaving behind personal belongings and unpaid bills. Police had investigated, but there was no evidence of foul play. People leave their lives behind sometimes, she said. It happens more often than you'd think. When I mentioned my aunt's name, the realtor went quiet. She remembered her, said she'd inquired about the property several times over the past few years, but never made an offer. Always asked specific questions about the basement, about storage space, about privacy. The realtor had found it odd but hadn't pushed. Real estate was about matching people with what they needed, even if their needs seemed unusual. I went back to my aunt's house that evening and stared at the sealed wall. The fingerprint-shaped stain seemed darker in the lamplight, more deliberate. I touched it with my finger. It felt smooth, like it had been rubbed into the plaster rather than just smeared across it. Someone had pressed hard, left their mark, and then sealed it away. The hammer felt heavy in my hands. The first blow cracked the plaster. The second opened a hole large enough to shine a flashlight through. The smell rushed out, not death, but life interrupted. stale air that had been trapped for years, carrying the scent of old fabric, paper, and something else I couldn't identify. Inside, the space was smaller than the blueprints suggested, maybe 4 feet wide, cramped and dark. There was a chair positioned to face the wall that separated this hidden room from the guest room. On the seat, a notebook filled with dates and times written in my aunt's careful handwriting. On the wall, dozens of small holes, each about the size of a pencil, drilled through to the other side. I realized what I was looking at. My aunt hadn't sealed away storage space. She'd sealed away a hiding place, a place where someone could sit quietly and watch the guest room through carefully drilled holes, watch whoever stayed there, record their habits, their movements, their private moments. The notebook entries went back years, different handwriting styles, different pens, but always the same format, dates, times, brief observations. Some entries were about strangers who'd rented the room. Others were about family members who'd visited. Some were about me from my childhood stays. The handwriting wasn't always my aunt's. I found photographs taped to the walls, taken through those holes, showing people in the guest room who clearly didn't know they were being watched. Some recent, some decades old. People sleeping, changing clothes, making phone calls they thought were private, all captured from behind that innocent-looking wall. At the bottom of the notebook, loose pages with different handwriting entirely. Someone else had been using this space, recording observations, making notes about the people in the photographs, planning something. The last entry was dated just weeks before my aunt's death. It mentioned me by name, noted that I would be inheriting the house, wondered if I would discover the hidden room. I sat in that cramped space for a long time, trying to understand what my aunt had been part of. The chair was worn smooth, where someone had spent countless hours sitting, watching, recording. The pencil holes were surrounded by faint stains where eyes had pressed close to peer through. This wasn't casual curiosity. This was systematic, organized, patient. When I finally climbed out and sealed the wall back up, I left everything exactly as I'd found it. The notebook, the photographs, the chair positioned just right, because I realized something that made my hands shake as I spread fresh plaster over the opening. The last entry in the notebook wasn't about the past. It was about the future, about someone else who would eventually find this room just as I had, about what they would do with what they discovered, about whether they would call the police or destroy the evidence or continue the work that had been started here. I smoothed the plaster carefully, making sure no seams showed. I hung new wallpaper, chose a pattern that would hide any imperfections. I moved my things into the master bedroom and started using the guest room for storage. Safe, innocent storage that no one would want to rent or sleep in. Sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds from behind that wall. Probably just the house settling, pipes cooling, wood expanding and contracting with the temperature. But I know the truth now. I know that some secrets don't die with the people who keep them. They just wait, sealed away, for the next person to discover them and decide what to do. The floor plan is still wrong. The space is still there, hidden but not gone. And sometimes, when I'm measuring other rooms, checking other walls, I wonder what else my aunt might have sealed away. What other spaces exist in this house that aren't supposed to be there. But I don't look for them anymore, because I've learned that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some doors are sealed for good reasons, and some truths are too dangerous to face, even when they're staring at you through carefully drilled holes in the wall. The house feels different now, heavier, like it's holding its breath, waiting to see what I'll do with what I know. Whether I'll become another entry in someone else's notebook, or whether I'll pick up the pencil myself and continue writing the story that was started long before I arrived. I keep the measuring tape in the kitchen drawer now. just in case I need to check the walls again, just in case the floor plan changes overnight and I wake up to find that another space has appeared where it shouldn't exist. After all, houses have their own memories, and some memories refuse to stay buried. Crime 3, I opened it without thinking like I do every day. But all the knives were gone, clean drawer, even the lining had been peeled back. I checked the dishwasher, nothing. I checked the sink, the drying rack, even the trash, gone, every single one. I don't have visitors. I haven't had anyone over in weeks, but under the cutting board on the counter, I found a single paring knife wrapped in wax paper. It was still wet. The blade felt heavier than I remembered, cold metal against my palm and that strange weight of something that had been used recently. I unwrapped it slowly, the wax paper making that crackling sound that echoed too loud in my empty kitchen. The handle was clean, spotless even, but there was something under my fingernail afterward, something dark. I live alone in a duplex and my neighbor shares the other half. We've shared keys for emergencies the way neighbors do, the way trusting people do. I knocked on her door that evening, casual as I could manage, asking if she'd borrowed anything recently. She smiled, that same smile she'd given me for 3 years, and said no, but her hands were bandaged. Small cuts, she explained, from gardening, rose thorns. She laughed when she said it, but her laugh sounded different, thinner. And when I looked past her into her kitchen, I could see her sink was still wet, like someone had been scrubbing it clean. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way she left for work each day at the same time I did, but came home much later. The way she'd started keeping her curtains drawn tight. The smell that drifted from her side of the building on certain days, metallic and sharp, like old pennies left in water. The police report was filed 3 towns over, a missing person case that had gone cold. Young woman disappeared from her apartment with no signs of struggle, no forced entry, nothing missing except her. The photograph in the newspaper showed someone with the same dark hair as my neighbor, the same delicate hands, but the name was different, and the article mentioned a distinctive scar on the victim's forearm, a crescent shape from a childhood accident. I'd seen that scar before. It was on my neighbor's arm, usually hidden under long sleeves, but visible that day she was hanging laundry in the shared backyard. I remembered because I'd wondered about it then, the way you wonder about strangers' stories. Now it felt like swallowing glass. The missing woman had a sister who'd been calling the police weekly, demanding updates. I found her number in the online forums where families of the missing gather to share information and keep hope alive. When I called, she told me things that made my hands shake. How her sister had been careful, cautious, never left doors unlocked. How she'd mentioned feeling watched in the weeks before she vanished. How she'd started keeping a knife under her pillow. Well, paring knife. I hung up and walked to my kitchen window. My neighbor was in her backyard digging. The soil looked rich and dark, freshly turned. She worked methodically, the way someone works when they've done something before. When she noticed me watching, she waved. That same friendly wave she'd given me countless times. But this time I could see the dirt under her fingernails from here. The next day I found a note slipped under my door. Just a few words in handwriting I recognized from the packages she'd signed for when I wasn't home. Thank you for being such a good neighbor. Some secrets are worth keeping. I never called the police. I never made that report. Instead, I bought new knives and installed better locks. I stopped making eye contact when we passed in the driveway. I learned to sleep with sounds I'd never noticed before, footsteps in the shared wall between our homes, muffled sounds that could be anything. The missing person case remains unsolved. The sister still calls the police, still posts in those online forums. Sometimes I read her updates, her desperate pleas for information, her theories about what might have happened. She's offering a reward now, substantial money for any information leading to answers. My neighbor still smiles when she sees me, still waves from her garden where nothing seems to grow despite all her digging, still keeps her curtains drawn tight, and sometimes, late at night, I smell that metallic scent drifting through the thin walls between us. I keep my new knives locked in a box now, all of them accounted for, counted twice each night before I sleep. But I still wonder about that single blade I found, wrapped so carefully in wax paper. Still wonder whose hands had held it last, what it had been used for in those missing hours. And I wonder if my neighbor knows that I know, if that's why she left that note, if that's why she still smiles at me with those dark eyes that seem to hold secrets deeper than the holes she digs in her backyard. The truth is, I could make that call. I could report what I've seen, what I suspect. But some knowledge changes you, and once you cross that line, there's no pretending innocence anymore. No going back to the person who simply opened a drawer and expected to find what had always been there. So I keep her secret and she keeps mine, the secret that I know and choose to do nothing. That makes me something I never thought I'd be. Someone who looks the other way when the right thing to do is clear. The knife drawer stays empty now, but sometimes I still hear the sound of metal against wood in the middle of the night, coming from next door, methodical and rhythmic, like someone preparing for something that requires precision. And I close my eyes, pull my pillow over my head, and pretend I don't hear anything at all. Crime 4, no one uses that room. The door stays closed, but when I opened it to grab a blanket, the smell hit me. Burnt sulfur like matches struck and snuffed out one after the other. The window was shut, locked from the inside. On the nightstand, the lamp had been unplugged. Tucked behind it, half melted and mashed flat, were 3 matchsticks. I checked the trash can. It was empty, but the bottom was scorched black in one spot, as if something had smoldered and gone out. My hands shook as I touched the edge of the nightstand. The wood felt cold, unnaturally cold for a room that should have been warmer than the rest of the house. I ran my fingers along the surface and found something else, tiny grooves carved into the wood like someone had pressed too hard with a pen or pencil. They formed letters, scratched so lightly I almost missed them. 3 words, barely visible, "Help me please." I backed out of the room and closed the door. My heart was pounding in that slow, heavy way that makes you notice each beat. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I walked through the hallways I'd known for years, but everything seemed slightly off. The family photos on the walls looked too formal, the smiles too forced. Had they always been like that? The guest room had been sealed off since the incident. That's what everyone called it, the incident. Never by name, never with details. Just the incident, spoken in lowered voices and followed by quick changes of subject. But I remembered fragments, police cars in the driveway, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and my cousin's face when she came to stay with us afterward. She looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything behind her eyes. I found her old journal in the basement storage boxes. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first few pages were normal, complaints about school, drawings of flowers, lists of favorite songs, but toward the end the handwriting changed. It became smaller, cramped, desperate. The entries grew shorter and more frantic. Can't sleep. Sounds in the walls. Someone watching. And then on the last page, written in red ink that looked suspiciously dark, "If something happens to me, check the guest room." Behind the lamp. The police report was easier to find than I expected. It was filed away in a folder marked personal documents, tucked between insurance papers and tax returns. 3 pages of dry, clinical language that stripped away all emotion from what happened. According to the report, she had been found in her bedroom, apparently having suffered a seizure during the early morning hours. No signs of foul play, no evidence of forced entry. natural causes, probably brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. Case closed. But there was something in the report that didn't sit right. The investigating officer noted that several matches had been found scattered around the house, in the kitchen, the living room, even the bathroom, all of them burnt down to nearly nothing. When asked about them, the family claimed they had been experiencing electrical problems and had been using matches for light. The officer accepted this explanation without further investigation. I called the detective who had handled the case. He was retired now, living across the country, but he remembered the incident clearly. His voice grew quiet when I mentioned my cousin's name. Strange case, he said. Everything looked normal on the surface, but there were details that bothered me. The family was too calm, too prepared with answers, and the girl's room, it was spotless, not like a teenager's room at all, like someone had cleaned it thoroughly before we arrived. He paused, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. There was something else. We found scratches on the inside of her bedroom door near the handle, like fingernail marks. When I asked about them, her father said she had a habit of picking at things when she was nervous. But those scratches were deep, desperate, like someone trying to claw their way out. After the call, I sat in my car outside the house for a long time. The guest room window faced the driveway, and I found myself staring at it. The curtains were drawn, but I could swear I saw them move slightly, as if someone had brushed against them from inside. The rational part of my mind knew it was probably just the air conditioning, but the rational part of my mind felt very small right then. I went back inside and stood outside the guest room door. I pressed my ear against it and listened. Nothing at first. Then, so faint I might have imagined it, I heard something like scratching, like fingernails against wood. I turned the handle slowly and pushed the door open. The smell was stronger now, not just matches, but something else underneath, something sweet and sickly that made my stomach turn. The scratches on the nightstand seemed deeper than before, more urgent. I knelt down and looked behind the lamp more carefully. There, wedged between the nightstand and the wall, was a small recording device, the kind you might use for lectures or meetings. My finger hovered over the play button for what felt like forever. The recording was mostly static at first. Then I heard her voice whisper, quiet and terrified. Day 12. They think I'm sleeping, but I can't sleep. Not with the sounds, not with him coming in at night. There was a long pause filled with the sound of her breathing. He says if I tell anyone, he'll hurt the family. He says no one will believe me anyway. He brings matches, burns them one by one while he watches me. Says it's to help me stay awake, to pay attention. The recording cut off abruptly. I sat on the floor of that cold room, holding the device in my shaking hands. The official report suddenly made perfect sense. The scattered matches throughout the house, the too-clean bedroom, the family's rehearsed answers, the scratches on her door. I thought about the detective's words. The family was too calm, too prepared. I thought about my cousin's hollow eyes, about the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. I thought about how quickly the case had been closed, how eager everyone had been to call it natural causes and move on. The worst part wasn't wondering who had done it. The worst part was wondering how many people had known and done nothing, how many had seen the signs and chosen to look the other way, how many had participated in the cover-up that followed. I put the recording device back where I found it. Some truths are too dangerous to expose, especially when they implicate people who are still alive, still in positions to hurt others. I closed the guest room door and walked away. But I didn't seal it off again. Some doors shouldn't be locked. The smell of matches follows me now. I catch it sometimes in unexpected places, the grocery store, the office, my own bedroom late at night. It's a reminder that some crimes never see justice, that some victims never get their stories told. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like family. Sometimes it looks like protection. Sometimes it looks like love. And sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly brave or particularly foolish, I go back to that guest room and listen. Because even though she's gone, even though her voice was silenced, she's still trying to tell someone what happened. She's still scratching messages into the wood, still burning through matches one by one, still whispering her truth into a device that no one was ever supposed to find. The case remains officially closed. Natural causes, no foul play suspected. But I know better now. We all know better. We just choose not to see. Crime 5, I was hanging a picture above the couch and the nail slid in too easily like the wall was hollow. I knocked, expecting a stud. Instead, I heard it, a faint knockback just once. I froze, pressed my ear against the drywall. Nothing. I cut a small hole behind the frame. Inside wasn't insulation, it was empty space. Dark, dry, silent, except for a crumpled receipt on the floor of the cavity, dated in a format I didn't recognize. The receipt was warm to the touch, despite being buried in a wall that hadn't been opened in years. The ink was fresh, bleeding slightly when I unfolded it. A grocery store purchase, milk, bread, cigarettes. The signature at the bottom was illegible, but something about the handwriting made my chest tighten. I'd seen those loops before, those careful curves that tried too hard to look casual. I called the previous tenant, the woman who'd lived here before me. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. Her voice was different than I remembered from our brief meeting during the lease transfer. Smaller, more careful. "You found something," she said before I could explain why I was calling. The silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. In the background, a television played softly, some crime show where detectives pieced together evidence with confident certainty. Real life, I was learning, offered no such clarity. "The wall," I managed. "I know about the wall." She agreed to meet me, but not at the apartment. "A coffee shop downtown," she said, "somewhere public." When she arrived, I barely recognized her. The confident woman who'd shown me around the place had been replaced by someone who kept checking the windows, whose hands shook as she stirred sugar into coffee she never drank. "He used to live next door," she began, not meeting my eyes. "Quiet man, worked nights, slept during the day. We shared that wall." The smell of her perfume was overwhelming, too sweet, like she was trying to mask something else. Something that reminded me of the metallic scent I'd noticed when I first cut into the drywall. The knocking started after he disappeared, just once, always the same spot. I told myself it was the building settling, but buildings don't knock back when you test them. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old messages. Her screen was cracked, the glass catching the light in sharp fragments. She showed me texts from a number that was no longer in service. Simple messages: "Can you hear me? Are you there? Please answer." The last one came 3 days after the police stopped looking for him. The police report, when I finally obtained it, read like fiction. A man simply vanished from his apartment. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. His rent was paid through the end of the month. His car was still in the garage. His coffee mug was still on the counter, half full, growing mold. But the report missed things. It didn't mention the scratches I'd found inside the wall cavity, deep gouges in the wood that looked like fingernails had made them. It didn't mention the small pile of dust beneath them, white dust that could have been drywall or could have been something else entirely. I started visiting the apartment next door. The new tenant was a student, barely out of her teens, who complained about strange sounds but attributed them to old pipes. She let me examine the wall from her side. The drywall was newer there, professionally installed. Someone had done careful work to cover whatever had happened. That night I pressed my ear against my wall again. The knocking came at irregular intervals now, sometimes soft, sometimes urgent. I began to recognize patterns. 3 short knocks, then silence, then 2 long ones. It reminded me of something, some half-remembered code from childhood games or emergency signals. The building superintendent was reluctant to discuss the previous tenant. He'd worked here for decades, seen people come and go, but something about this case made him nervous. He kept mentioning how quiet the man had been, how he never caused problems, paid his rent on time. Perfect tenant, he called him. Too perfect, maybe. He asked about the walls once, the superintendent finally admitted. Wanted to know if they were soundproof. Said he was a light sleeper, didn't want to disturb anyone. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, disturbed every night by sounds that might not even be real. I found the man's former workplace, a warehouse where he'd managed inventory. His supervisor remembered him as methodical, careful with details, but there had been discrepancies in the records near the end. Small amounts of missing stock, nothing that would warrant investigation, but enough to raise questions. He was asking about the night security, the supervisor told me. Wanted to know who had access after hours, how the cameras worked. We thought he was just being thorough. The security footage from the warehouse was long gone, but the guard who'd worked those nights was still around. He painted a different picture of the missing man, someone who stayed late, who knew the building's blind spots, who seemed to be preparing for something. He gave me this, the guard said, producing a small notebook from his desk drawer. Said to hold on to it, that it was important, never said why. The notebook contained addresses, license plate numbers, schedules, a careful record of movements, patterns, routines. At the bottom of the last page, in that same careful handwriting I'd seen on the receipt, was my address, written months before I'd ever seen the apartment. The previous tenant agreed to meet me again, but this time she chose the location more carefully, a park bench where we could see anyone approaching. She looked worse than before, her skin pale and drawn. She'd been having dreams, she said, dreams where she could hear someone calling her name through the walls. "I need to tell you something about the receipt," she said, not looking at me. I wrote it. The confession came slowly, piece by piece. She'd been receiving money from the missing man, payments for information about other tenants' schedules, their habits, their vulnerabilities. Small amounts, nothing that seemed harmful at the time. Just details about when people came and went, who lived alone, who had valuables. He said it was for insurance purposes, background checks for the building management. I needed the money. But the payment stopped when he disappeared, and then came the discovery that changed everything. Cleaning out his apartment after the lease expired, she'd found the other notebooks, detailed surveillance records on dozens of people, photos taken through windows, personal information gathered from trash and mail, a systematic study of potential victims. The police never found those notebooks. I took them before they searched the place. She'd hidden the evidence in the wall cavity, thinking it would be safe there. But walls, as I'd learned, were not as solid as they seemed. The truth, when it finally emerged, was uglier than any mystery. The missing man hadn't been a victim. He'd been preparing to become something much worse. The notebook the security guard gave me contained the final piece, a detailed plan for a series of break-ins, carefully timed for when residents would be away. But something had gone wrong. Maybe he'd grown suspicious of his informant. Maybe he'd realized the police were getting too close. Or maybe he'd simply decided that disappearing was easier than facing what he'd become. The knocking stopped after I moved the notebooks to the police. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I still press my ear to that wall. Not because I expect to hear anything, but because silence can be just as disturbing as sound. Because the real horror isn't in the noises we hear, but in the ones we choose not to report. The small compromises we make that lead to larger betrayals. The previous tenant moved away shortly after our last conversation. She left no forwarding address, no way to reach her. But sometimes I wonder if she found another apartment with thin walls, another desperate situation that required small favors for money. Because predators, I've learned, rarely work alone. They build networks of silence, communities of complicity. The wall is solid now, properly repaired with fresh insulation, but I've kept the receipt, that first piece of evidence that unraveled everything. It sits in my desk drawer, a reminder that the most disturbing mysteries aren't always about what happened, but about what we allowed to happen while we convinced ourselves we were just minding our own business. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder where he went. Whether he found another building with thin walls and desperate tenants, whether somewhere someone else is hanging a picture and discovering that the nail slides in too easily, that the wall sounds hollow when they knock. The truly unsettling truth about crime isn't that it happens in the darkness. It's that it happens in plain sight, with the quiet cooperation of people who tell themselves they're just trying to survive. Crime 6, I was cleaning the bathroom and noticed the water draining slower than usual. I reached under the sink to check the pipe, but found something strange, 2 outlets branching off the same drain. One was standard, the other smaller, older, leading somewhere behind the wall. I followed it as far as I could until it disappeared into concrete. When I returned, there were drops of water trailing from the smaller pipe. The main drain was dry. The house had been my grandmother's before she passed. I'd inherited it along with all her mysteries, her half-finished crossword puzzles still folded on the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on books she'd never finish. But this pipe, this second drain, felt different, deliberate. I knelt on the cold tile floor, running my fingers along the junction where the pipe split. The metal was worn smooth in places, as if hands had touched it repeatedly over the decades. The smaller pipe had a slight bend to it, angled downward at a sharp degree that seemed engineered rather than accidental. When I pressed my ear against the wall, I could hear something, not water, something else, a faint scratching like fingernails against wood. The basement held answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The concrete walls were older than the house itself, foundation stones that predated the neighborhood by decades. I traced the pipe's path through the ceiling joists, following its route through a maze of electrical conduits and heating ducts. It terminated behind a panel of newer drywall, the kind of patch job someone does when they want to hide rather than repair. My flashlight beam caught something metallic behind the gap where the pipe entered the wall. I widened the opening with my fingers, feeling the drywall crumble away like stale bread. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a small metal box, the kind used for storing documents, the kind that keeps things dry. The papers inside were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to my grandmother, but the postmarks were wrong. They spanned 40 years, yet the addresses were all local. Same district, same postal code. As if someone had been writing to her from just down the street, decade after decade, never sending the letters through proper channels. The tone grew more urgent with each passing year. References to our arrangement, mentions of the overflow, apologies for the inconvenience of the extra drainage. The writer seemed to know intimate details about the house, about renovations my grandmother had made, about times when she'd been away. The final letter, dated just months before her death, contained a single line: "The connection will need to be maintained after you're gone." I climbed the stairs with unsteady legs, the box clutched against my chest. In the bathroom, I stared at that second drain with new understanding. The water droplets were still there, fresh and warm against my fingertips. I turned on the faucet and watched the water flow. The main drain gurgled and accepted the stream normally, but the smaller pipe, the older one, began to vibrate, a low humming that seemed to come from deep within the walls. I shut off the water, but the humming continued. It was coming from next door, through the shared wall, through whatever connection that pipe maintained with the house beside mine. The house where an elderly man lived alone, where the windows stayed dark even during the day, where I'd seen him watching me from behind his curtains since I'd moved in. The property records at the municipal building told a story I wished I'd never learned. The two houses had been built as one, divided later by a developer who'd cut corners on the separation. The plumbing, the electrical, even the foundation, they'd all been partially shared, but the permits showed something else. Modifications made without approval, connections maintained without inspection, work done in the shadows by people who didn't want their activities documented. I found myself standing in my backyard, staring at the fence that separated my property from his. The wood was newer than the houses, installed recently enough that the nails still gleamed, but beneath it, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was another connection. A small gap just wide enough for a pipe to pass through. The grass around it was different, greener, as if it had been fed by something other than rainwater. When I knocked on his door, he answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He was smaller than he'd appeared from a distance, his hands spotted with age but steady. His eyes held a recognition that made my stomach turn. He knew why I was there. "You found the letters," he said, not a question. I nodded, unable to speak. "She never told you about our understanding." The word understanding hung in the air between us like a confession. He stepped aside, inviting me in, but I remained on his doorstep. Through the open door I could see his bathroom, a mirror image of mine but reversed. The sink had modifications, additional fixtures I couldn't identify from my position. "The drainage was necessary," he continued, his voice soft but urgent. "The basement of this house floods without proper runoff. Your grandmother agreed to the connection decades ago. It was mutually beneficial." But the letters had told a different story. They'd spoken of overflow, of maintenance, of connections that needed to be sustained. They'd mentioned schedules, times when my grandmother would be away, opportunities for necessary access. I asked him about the letters, about the decades of correspondence that had never been mailed. His face changed then, the careful composure slipping away like a mask. He'd been writing to her, he explained, but delivering them by hand, slipping them under her door, leaving them in her mailbox, ensuring she understood the importance of maintaining their arrangement. "The pipes connected our houses," he said, "but they connected our lives as well." I left without another word, but the understanding followed me home. That night I lay in bed listening to the sounds from the walls, water moving through pipes, but also other sounds, footsteps that weren't mine, voices that seemed to come from just beyond hearing. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like a shared space where privacy was an illusion. The next morning I called a plumber to disconnect the secondary drain, but when he arrived and examined the pipe, he shook his head. The connection was structural, he explained. Removing it would require major work, permits, inspections. It would take months and cost more than I could afford. As he packed his tools, he mentioned something that made my blood freeze. He'd worked on the house next door just last month. Similar issue, he said. The owner had wanted to modify his bathroom drainage, had been very specific about maintaining certain connections. Very insistent that the work be done properly so the flow would continue uninterrupted. I stand in my bathroom now, watching water drip from that smaller pipe. Each drop falls with perfect timing, as if controlled by something more deliberate than gravity. Through the walls, I can hear my neighbor moving about his house, following routines that seem to mirror my own. When I shower, I hear his water running. When I brush my teeth, I hear the sound of his faucet. The letters remain in their box, locked away but not forgotten. The final one haunts me most, with its promise that the connection would be maintained. I wonder now if my grandmother's death was as natural as it seemed, or if it was simply the end of one arrangement and the beginning of another. The drops continue to fall, and I've learned not to wipe them away. They return too quickly, as if the house itself is weeping, as if whatever flows through that second drain carries more than just water. Crime 7, I leave them by the door every night, same angle, same pair. But that morning the souls were facing the wrong way, heels to the wall, toes pointed into the room, like someone had stepped out of them while walking in. I checked the floor, no dirt, no footprints. But inside the left shoe was a dried leaf, curled and brittle, coated in something white. I don't own trees like that. I've never seen leaves like that in this area. The apartment felt different, not violated exactly, but rearranged. The couch cushions pressed down in places I hadn't sat. The kitchen faucet dripping at a rhythm I didn't recognize. I touched the handle, still warm. My coffee mug sat on the counter, but I remembered washing it the night before. Inside, a ring of residue marked where liquid had dried, not coffee, something darker. I work insurance claims. People lie to me professionally, so I notice inconsistencies, but this felt personal, intimate almost, like someone had studied my routines and then deliberately disrupted them. The first call came while I was examining the leaf. Female voice, older, speaking just above a whisper. She asked if I'd found what she left. When I demanded who she was, she hung up. The number showed as blocked, but something about her tone made my skin crawl. She sounded satisfied, vindicated. I placed the leaf in a plastic bag and drove to the local library. The botanical section helped me identify it, a specimen from a tree that doesn't grow naturally here. The white coating tested positive for calcium carbonate when I scraped some onto pH paper, chalk dust, or crushed bone. That afternoon, I returned to find my front door unlocked. I never leave it unlocked. Inside, every book on my shelf had been pulled forward exactly 2 inches. Each one precise, deliberate. On my desk sat a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Inside were photographs, black and white, professional quality. They showed a woman I didn't recognize, maybe 40 years old, standing in what looked like a courthouse hallway. Her face was circled in red ink. Below the photos, handwritten notes in careful block letters. She knew what happened. She knew, and she said nothing. The woman looked familiar in that unsettling way where recognition hovers just beyond reach. I studied her features, sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, a scar running along her left temple. Someone had written a date on the back of each photo, but the ink was smeared beyond reading. I started carrying a small recorder with me. If someone was playing games, I wanted evidence. The second call came 3 days later, same voice, clearer this time. She said the woman in the photos was named after a flower. Said she lived 2 blocks from the courthouse where the pictures were taken. Said she worked nights at a medical facility and kept detailed records of everything she witnessed there. She documented things that were supposed to stay buried, the caller whispered, but she never turned them in, never spoke up, even when people started dying. The line went dead. I found myself driving past medical facilities, looking for parking lots where a woman with that particular walk might emerge after dark. On the 4th night I saw her, same face, same scar, but she moved differently than I expected, quick, nervous glances over her shoulder, keys already positioned between her fingers as she approached her car. I followed her home, a modest house with dead plants in the front yard and newspapers piling up on the porch. She lived alone but kept security lights burning all night. I watched from across the street as shadows moved behind her curtains. She paced, constantly, like someone expecting visitors she didn't want to see. The next morning I found another envelope. This time it contained medical records, photocopies but clear enough to read. Incident reports from a facility where the flower-named woman had worked years ago. Patients admitted with suspicious injuries. Cause of death listings that didn't match the symptoms described in the notes. Deaths that occurred during shift changes when accountability became fuzzy. Each report bore her signature at the bottom, her neat handwriting confirming details that seemed increasingly impossible to believe. A child with broken ribs who allegedly fell downstairs. An elderly man with burns that were explained as accidental contact with hot water that wasn't hot enough to cause such damage. A woman who died from complications after what should have been routine surgery, but whose preoperative notes mentioned no existing conditions that would explain the outcome. I started losing sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in those courthouse photos. The woman who witnessed things that should have been reported but weren't, who signed documents that protected people who shouldn't have been protected, who kept quiet when voices were needed most. The medical records painted a picture of systematic negligence, maybe worse, but they also showed someone trapped in an impossible situation, someone who might have been threatened into silence, someone who might have been protecting herself or others by staying quiet. I began to understand why someone wanted her found, why someone wanted her story told, but I also began to understand why she kept moving, why she lived with all those lights burning, why she paced behind her curtains every night. The truth wasn't what I expected to find. It never is. The final envelope appeared on my kitchen table while I was sleeping. I woke to find it there, perfectly centered, containing a single sheet of paper with an address written in that same careful block lettering. Below the address, a simple message: "She's waiting for you now." When I arrived, the house was dark. The front door stood slightly open. Inside, I found evidence of a life interrupted. Dinner half prepared on the stove, television still playing, reading glasses folded on an open book, but no sign of the woman herself. On her kitchen counter sat my coffee mug, the one that had appeared in my apartment with a strange residue. Next to it, a handwritten note in her careful script. "I tried to tell someone, I tried for years, but no one wanted to listen. Maybe someone will listen to you." I never found her. The police filed a missing person report, but with no family to push for answers, the case moved to the bottom of their priority list. The medical facility where she'd worked claimed no knowledge of any irregularities. The documents I'd received couldn't be authenticated without her testimony. But I still think about those photographs, about someone who cared enough to make sure her story didn't disappear completely, about the woman who left her door open for me, trusting that I would understand what she couldn't say while she was still alive to face the consequences. I keep the leaf in its plastic bag. Sometimes I take it out and hold it up to the light, studying the pattern of veins beneath that white coating. Evidence of something that doesn't belong here. Proof that someone crossed boundaries to make sure truth found its way to someone who might be brave enough to speak it. The shoes by my door face the right direction now, but I still check them every morning, wondering if someone else needs to tell me something I'm not ready to hear. Crime 8, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was trash day and I almost threw it away with the junk mail. no return address, my name written in careful block letters like someone had taken their time. The paper felt expensive between my fingers, thick, cream-colored, old-fashioned. I set it on the kitchen counter and forgot about it. 3 days later, I found myself staring at it while my coffee grew cold. Something about the way it sat there bothered me. Not just the mystery of who sent it, but the weight of it. Too heavy for a single sheet, too light for anything substantial. I picked it up again and held it to the window. The outline of something rectangular showed through the paper. A photograph. I should have opened it then. Instead, I tucked it into the drawer with the utility bills and takeout menus. Out of sight, but not out of mind. The call came 2 weeks later. A woman's voice, professional but strained. She said she was calling about my neighbor across the hall. The one with the garden boxes on her fire escape. The one who always smiled when we passed in the lobby but never spoke. They found her that morning. The woman on the phone asked if I'd noticed anything unusual recently. Any visitors, any sounds. I said no, which was true. But as I hung up, I thought about the envelope, still unopened, still waiting. I retrieved it from the drawer and placed it on the table. My hands shook as I tore along the edge. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph, slightly faded like it had been taken years ago. It showed my neighbor's apartment door, but from an angle I'd never seen, too high up, too far to the left. Someone had been watching from my apartment. I flipped the photograph over, a date written in the same careful block letters, 3 months ago, before I'd ever received the envelope, before I'd even known my neighbor's name. The apartment felt different now, smaller, like the walls had moved closer while I wasn't paying attention. I walked through each room, checking locks, examining windows. Everything seemed normal until I reached the bedroom. The carpet near the closet showed the faint impression of furniture that hadn't been there in years. A chair, maybe, or a small table, the kind someone might use to reach something high. I knelt down and pressed my palm against the indentation. The fibers were compressed but not dusty, recent. I called the building manager, a gruff man who complained about everything but fixed nothing. He said he'd never given anyone access to my apartment, no maintenance requests, no inspections. His voice carried the irritation of someone interrupted during their favorite television show. But he paused when I mentioned the photograph. He said my neighbor had called him once a few weeks before she died. Something about noise coming from my apartment during the day, footsteps, furniture being moved. She was certain someone was inside when I wasn't home. He dismissed it. Old buildings make sounds, pipes settle, floorboards creak. Now he wasn't so sure. I spent that night in a hotel, clean sheets and manufactured silence, but I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. Who had taken it? How had they gotten into my apartment? And why send it to me now? The next morning I returned with a locksmith. We changed every lock, installed a deadbolt, added a chain. The man worked efficiently, commenting on the quality of the existing hardware. Professional grade, he said, better than most apartments, like someone had upgraded the security recently. But I'd never requested any upgrades. After he left, I searched every inch of the apartment. Behind picture frames, under furniture, inside air vents, I found nothing obvious. No cameras, no recording devices, just the lingering feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I discovered the journal. It was wedged behind the radiator in the living room, wrapped in plastic. Water damaged but readable. My neighbor's handwriting filled page after page. Dates, times, observations. She'd been watching me. Not in a malicious way, more like someone trying to solve a puzzle. She wrote about my routines, when I left for work, when I returned, the groceries I bought, the visitors I had. But some of the entries made no sense. She described seeing me come home twice in the same afternoon, once through the front entrance, once through the service door in the basement. She wrote about conversations I'd apparently had on my phone, but I barely used it. Long calls with someone she couldn't identify, heated arguments that ended in what sounded like crying. I don't cry easily. The final entry was dated the day before she died. She'd seen someone in my apartment window, standing perfectly still, watching her apartment. She'd waved, thinking it was me. The figure had waved back. But I'd been at work all day. I called the detective handling her case, a tired-sounding man who spoke in careful sentences. He listened to my story without interruption. The envelope, the photograph, the journal. When I finished, he asked if I'd ever given anyone a key to my apartment. I hadn't. He asked if I'd ever noticed anything missing. Money, jewelry, personal documents. Nothing was missing. He asked if I'd considered the possibility that I might be losing time. Stress could cause memory gaps. People did things they didn't remember, especially after traumatic events. I hung up and stared at the photograph again. My neighbor's door, taken from my apartment, but the angle was wrong. I held it up and tried to match the perspective. Too high, too far to the right. Unless someone had been standing in the spot where my bookshelf used to be. I'd moved that bookshelf 6 months ago, donated it to charity, but in the photograph I could see its shadow on the wall, faint but unmistakable. The envelope had been mailed before I'd moved the furniture. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. The locks have been changed, the apartment has been searched, the police have my statement, but questions remain. Who took the photograph? Who sent the envelope? Why did my neighbor die the day after she saw someone in my window? And why do I keep finding evidence of a life I don't remember living? This morning I found another envelope, same paper, same careful handwriting. It's sitting on my kitchen counter now, unopened, waiting. I'm afraid to look inside, but I'm more afraid of what it might mean if I don't. Crime 9, I dust my shelves often. There's one frame I've had for years, plain wood, black and white photo inside. But today the picture was different. Same frame, same position, but the photo showed a room I didn't recognize. A kitchen, old, decaying. There was something written on the countertop in dust, barely visible. A single word smeared by a finger. I tried removing the photo, but it was sealed tight behind the glass. When I turned it over, the back had been nailed shut. The smell hit me first when I walked into her apartment. Not death, I'd smelled that before. This was different, sweet, cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The landlord had called me because I was listed as her emergency contact, though I couldn't remember giving anyone that information. She'd been missing for 2 weeks. Her kitchen looked exactly like the photo in my frame. I stood there feeling the cold linoleum through my shoes, staring at the same countertop I'd seen in my living room that morning. The dust was still there, and I could make out that same smeared word, help. My hands started shaking as I pulled out my phone to photograph it, but when I looked through the camera, the word wasn't visible. Only when I stared directly could I see it. The detective assigned to the case was tired. I could tell by the way he held his coffee cup, fingers wrapped around it like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He listened to my story about the photograph with the patience of someone who'd heard stranger things, but his eyes never quite met mine. When I showed him the frame, he examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands. Interesting craftsmanship, he said, running his thumb along the sealed edges. Someone really didn't want this opened. I asked if he could have it analyzed, maybe find fingerprints on the nails or determine how long ago it had been sealed. He made a note in his pad but said the department was backlogged. Missing persons cases without signs of foul play weren't high priority. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her apartment, how neat everything was except for that kitchen. Dishes still in the sink, coffee cup half full on the counter, like she'd just stepped out. The detective had mentioned she'd left her purse behind but taken her keys. Her car was still in the parking lot. I started going through my own memories, trying to figure out when I'd first acquired that frame. It had always been there, or so I thought. But memories are funny things. They shift and settle like sediment, and sometimes what you think you remember isn't what actually happened. The next morning I called the photo lab where I used to work. The owner recognized my voice immediately. He'd been in business for 30 years, developed thousands of photographs. When I described the image in my frame, he went quiet for a long time. Black and white kitchen photo, he repeated slowly. Dust on the counter. Yeah, I remember that one. Someone brought in a roll of film about a month ago. Nervous type, paid in cash. Most of the photos were normal stuff, but that kitchen shot was strange, made me uncomfortable developing it. I asked if he remembered who brought it in, but he said the customer had worn a hat and sunglasses. Spoke quietly. Could have been anyone. The photo lab owner still had the negatives. When I went to collect them, he handed me a small envelope with shaking hands. Inside were 12 exposures. Most showed ordinary scenes, a park, some buildings, a dog on a leash, but 3 were of that kitchen, taken from different angles. In one, I could see a shadow on the floor that looked human-shaped. I brought the negatives to the detective, but he seemed less interested this time. The missing woman's case had been transferred to another department. A family member had come forward claiming she'd had mental health issues, a history of disappearing. The investigation was being scaled back. But I couldn't let it go. I went back to her apartment building and talked to the neighbors. The woman in the unit below said she'd heard strange noises in the weeks before the disappearance. Not loud noises, just the sound of furniture being moved around, usually very late. And once, she'd heard what sounded like someone crying, but it came from the walls themselves, not from any specific apartment. The building superintendent was more forthcoming. He'd been working there for 15 years and knew all the tenants. She'd been quiet, reliable, always paid rent early. But about a month before she disappeared, she'd started asking strange questions. Did the building have hidden rooms? Had anyone ever reported unusual smells? Were there any units that had been sealed off? I asked to see the building's layout plans. In the basement storage room, he pulled out old blueprints. The building had been renovated several times over the decades. What caught my attention was a small space behind her kitchen wall, an area that had been walled up during a renovation in the 1980s. According to the plans, it had once been a pantry. The superintendent agreed to let me examine the wall. We used a stud finder to locate the hollow space. It was definitely there, about 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. When I knocked on the wall, the sound was different, emptier. There was a faint smell coming from somewhere, the same sweet, decaying odor I'd noticed in her apartment. Getting permission to open the wall required paperwork, city permits, approval from the building owner. The process took weeks. During that time, I found myself obsessing over the photograph in my frame. I'd stare at it for hours, studying every detail. The dust pattern on the counter seemed to shift slightly each time I looked, as if someone had disturbed it. One evening, I noticed something new in the photo. There was a piece of paper visible under the sink, just a corner sticking out. I'd never seen it before, but there it was, clear as anything. I tried to make out what was written on it, but the resolution wasn't high enough. When the demolition crew finally opened the wall, they found a small room that hadn't been touched in decades. Old shelves lined the walls, covered in dust and debris, but in the corner, wrapped in plastic sheeting, was a collection of items that made my stomach turn. Photographs, dozens of them, all black and white, all of kitchens. The detective was suddenly very interested again. Each photograph showed a different kitchen, but they all had the same element, words written in dust on the counters. Help appeared in several of them. Others said trapped or find me. Some had shadows that looked deliberately positioned, like someone had been standing just out of frame. But what disturbed me most was what we found underneath the photographs. A notebook filled with addresses and dates going back 20 years. Her address was there, dated just 2 months ago, and at the bottom of the last page, in careful handwriting, was my address. The investigation expanded rapidly after that. Police connected the photographs to a series of missing persons cases spanning 2 decades. Always women, always living alone. Always reported missing by someone who claimed to be an emergency contact but couldn't explain how they'd gotten that role. I was questioned extensively. They wanted to know about my connection to the missing woman, about the photograph in my frame, about how I'd known to look behind the wall. I told them everything I could remember, but memories are unreliable things. The more they pressed, the less certain I became about my own timeline. The forensics team found no fingerprints on the sealed photograph frame, no DNA evidence. The nails holding it shut were old, but they couldn't determine exactly when it had been sealed. The photo itself was genuine, not doctored or manipulated. Someone had actually been in that kitchen, had actually photographed that word written in dust. They never found her body. The other missing women from the notebook were never found either. The case remains open, but without physical evidence linking the photographs to actual crimes, there's little the police can do. The district attorney's office declined to file charges against anyone. I still have the frame. The detective said I could keep it since it wasn't technically evidence of a crime. The photograph inside has changed again. Now it shows a different room, what looks like a basement. There's something written on the concrete floor, but I can't make out what it says. Sometimes I catch myself studying it too closely, memorizing details that weren't there before. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I'm the one taking these photographs, if I'm the one sealing them in frames and placing them in strangers' homes, if I'm the reason those women disappeared. The human mind protects itself in strange ways. It creates gaps where the truth is too terrible to acknowledge. It builds walls around memories that might destroy us if we examine them too closely. I dust my shelves often now, more often than I used to, and every time I do, I check that frame carefully, looking for changes. Because deep down, I know that when the photograph changes again, when it shows me a new room with new words written in dust, I'll have to decide whether to investigate or to simply pretend I never noticed. The choice between truth and self-preservation. Between justice and sanity. Between being the hunter or the hunted. Story 10. The worn envelope held a fresh stamp, hinting at recent delivery. Delicately, the detective revealed its contents, a solitary sheet of paper bearing a message in hurried, uneven type. I am sorry for what I did. The paper exuded a faint dampness, an eerie scent of iron clinging to it. A reddish smear along the edge caught their attention, not ink but something more sinister. Detective Sarah Morgan secured the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved hands moving with practiced precision. The forensics team confirmed her suspicions the stain was human blood, a match to DNA from an unsolved homicide case that had long plagued the department. The victim, journalist Rebecca Warren, had been brutally murdered in her apartment, her belongings scattered. Her unfinished story hinted at a motive for the heinous crime. Years had passed with no resolution until this mysterious letter arrived, addressed simply to the Homicide Division. Barely any fingerprints graced the paper and envelope, only faint smudges indicating the sender's caution. The postmark provided a rare light, prompting Morgan to gather her team for a crucial briefing. Surrounded by images of crime scenes and suspect profiles, she pinned the letter at the center of the board. "This changes everything," she announced. "Our killer shows remorse." Detective James Chen, Morgan's longtime partner on the case, countered, suggesting the blood could be a macabre charade, a taunt to the investigators. Tracing the typewriter's unique markings led them to a vintage model no longer in production. A rare find, but not impossible. The hunt expanded to antique shops and collectors in the region. Delving into Rebecca's life, they uncovered her fearless pursuit of truth, particularly in an investigation involving a wealthy, politically connected family. As suspicions grew, interviews with Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, revealed a shift in his demeanor, hinting at hidden truths. A second letter arrived, mirroring the first with its cryptic message and blood-stained edge. The investigation honed in on the deceased patriarch's mansion, where suspicions fell on the eldest son, Richard. His polished alibi crumbled under scrutiny, leading to a breakthrough discovery in a hidden room filled with incriminating evidence. The link between Richard and Michael emerged through financial transactions and covert recordings, exposing a sinister plot to silence Rebecca permanently. Arrests were made, a trial ensued, and justice prevailed. The weight of guilt, captured in those blood-stained letters, served as a haunting reminder that no crime goes unpunished. As Rebecca's story unfolded, it became a lesson in detective work, a testament to the power of old-fashioned clues and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. The case of Rebecca Warren stood as a beacon in training new investigators, illustrating that even the most meticulously planned crimes can unravel under the weight of conscience and the enduring echoes of remorse. Story 11: The Enigmatic Victorian House. She crossed the threshold, disturbing the thick layers of dust that danced lazily in the still air of the abandoned Victorian. The once grand house had stood empty for years, its faded walls bearing witness to the passage of time, its furniture draped in ghostly sheets. As she ventured further, each step felt like a journey into a suspended moment, frozen in a peculiar kind of silence. But amidst the eerie stillness, there was a peculiar anomaly that set this place apart from mere neglect. The doors. Every door she opened, every corridor she wandered down, always led her back to the same room, the parlor. It was as if the house itself conspired to keep her within its enigmatic confines, a maze of endless repetition. The only way out seemed to be the way she had come, yet when she turned to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished into thin air, leaving her stranded in this labyrinth of forgotten secrets. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form had transformed the once quiet Victorian into a scene of intrigue and dread. Detective Sarah Lynn stood at the threshold, observing the shadowy figures of forensic technicians moving like phantoms through the dim interior. The house had garnered a reputation among the locals, a place where compasses spun without direction, where whispers of unseen watchers lingered in the air. But now its mysteries had taken a darker turn, shrouded in the veil of death. The initial examination suggests she passed roughly 3 days ago, murmured the medical examiner, his voice a mere whisper in the oppressive silence. Death by asphyxiation is the likely cause. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene, her hands folded with a tranquil grace. There were no signs of struggle, no marks of violence. The scene exuded a haunting calmness that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. "Who found her?" Lind inquired, her gaze flickering over her notes. "A real estate agent showing the property," her partner responded. "They mistook her for a trespasser until they drew closer." The Victorian had remained abandoned since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly 5 years prior. Legal disputes had left the house in a state of neglect, forgotten by all except those who sought thrills in its decaying halls. Morgan Pierce, a young graduate student with a penchant for exploring architectural oddities, had been drawn to the house in pursuit of her academic curiosity. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days before, Lind noted. Morgan mentioned something about visiting the House of Lost Souls for her research. Through the course of the investigation, it came to light that Morgan had frequented the house in the weeks leading up to her demise. Her journal entries spoke of strange echoes, inexplicable chills, and doors that defied logic by leading to different chambers each time they were opened. In her final entry, she alluded to bringing specialized equipment to capture what she cryptically referred to as spatial anomalies. Yet, this equipment remained conspicuously absent. The autopsy unveiled a puzzling detail: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance associated with shamanic rituals known to induce disorientation and vivid illusions, though not in lethal doses. She wasn't one to partake in recreational substances, her boyfriend asserted during questioning. Morgan was meticulous in her methods. She wouldn't jeopardize her work knowingly. Further scrutiny of Morgan's digital trail unveiled fragments of deleted messages on her phone. Correspondence with an individual who shared her fascination with the enigmatic house, someone who claimed to hold the key to its mysteries. The exchanges grew increasingly intimate and enigmatic, hinting at a deeper connection to the secrets harbored within the Victorian's walls. The investigation eventually led Lind to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian whose expertise in rare spatial phenomena had drawn Morgan's attention. Their professional collaboration had blossomed into something more profound, a shared quest for the truth hidden within the confines of the house. Reeves, when questioned, appeared genuinely distraught by Morgan's untimely demise. "The house has a reputation," he confessed. "The original architect wove illusions and distortions into its design, seeking to bewilder and confound. Morgan believed there was a deeper truth waiting to be unveiled, a truth beyond mere trickery of perception." However, Reeves possessed a solid alibi for the time window of Morgan's passing, substantiated by security footage of him delivering a lecture at a distant university symposium. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source: the revelation of a long-buried family secret by Eleanor Blackwood's grandson residing abroad. "My grandmother wasn't the only one to perish in that house," he disclosed. "There were others, always found in the parlor, always in a state of serene repose. The family referred to it as the claiming." He provided Lind with journals spanning generations, chronicling deaths initially attributed to natural causes, but sharing a chilling pattern of individuals succumbing to what the family euphemistically termed the influence. A secondary sweep of the property unearthed a concealed compartment behind the parlor's hearth. Within this hidden chamber lay Morgan's missing equipment and a collection of artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously arranged in a geometric pattern. At the heart of this arrangement rested a weathered figurine, its features smoothed by the touch of countless hands across time. Analysis identified the figurine as a deity associated with liminal spaces, the thresholds between worlds. Traces of the alkaloid matched those found in Morgan's system, hinting at a deeper connection to the house's mysteries. The investigation took a sinister turn when analysis of dust patterns within the house revealed the presence of an unidentified individual at the time of Morgan's passing. Partial fingerprints, distinct from Morgan's or any known visitors, were recovered from doorknobs throughout the residence. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his apartment. Like Morgan, he was found seated near the entrance, a look of tranquility upon his features, the same alkaloid present in his system. Clutched in his hand was a key that bore no resemblance to any lock in his living quarters, yet it fit snugly into the secret compartment within the Victorian. In his final missive, a poignant email addressed to himself as if to preserve a testament, Reeves penned, "The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct, the doors led where they have always led, yet a subtle force tricks you into believing you are trapped in a loop. Once you grasp the truth, you are free to depart at will, but by then, the desire to leave has waned. The case remains open, marked as suspicious deaths under ongoing investigation. The Victorian stands condemned, its access monitored by vigilant authorities. Yet whispers persist of spectral lights flickering within its confines on certain moonlit nights, of visitors who vanish without a trace. Some locals maintain that the house claims those who delve too deeply into its enigmas, while others posit that Morgan and Reeves unearthed a force ancient and potent, existing within the interstices of conventional reality. The veracity of these tales remains as elusive as an exit in a house where all doors lead back to the beginning, where the boundaries between perception and reality blur into a haze of mystery. Story 12. The costume shop prepared to close its doors, offering its old inventory to eager buyers. Amidst the dusty shelves, a woman discovered a mask that drew her in with its delicate yet eerily lifelike features. Placing it on the counter, the cashier hesitated, his voice barely audible as he muttered, "That's not ours." Perplexed, she searched for a tag but found none. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to take the mysterious mask home with her. That night, a soft sound stirred her from slumber. The gentle whisper of fabric shifting caught her attention. To her astonishment, the mask was no longer resting on the dresser where she had left it. Instead, it sat ominously on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, would later be discovered by her concerned neighbor. As the neighbor pushed open the slightly ajar front door, the morning light spilled into the darkened home, illuminating a chilling scene. Catherine lay lifeless on her bedroom floor, the mask nowhere to be found. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene, where forensics worked diligently to document every detail. Amidst the rhythmic clicks of camera shutters and hushed voices, an officer remarked on the absence of forced entry. The detective, her keen eyes scanning the room, noted subtle details that hinted at a deeper mystery. An open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass seemingly ordinary, yet concealing dark secrets surrounding the woman's untimely demise. The medical examiner, his expression grave, struggled to determine the cause of death. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, just an expression of terror frozen on Catherine's features. Bending closer, the detective whispered, "Something scared her to death." Catherine, an art appraiser known for her meticulous nature, had a knack for spotting authenticity. Colleagues praised her discerning eye, her ability to detect even the slightest inconsistencies. Could this very talent have led to her tragic end? The investigation took a perplexing turn when security footage from the costume shop unveiled a peculiar encounter. The cashier's genuine confusion over the mask's origin raised more questions than answers. Visiting the now empty shop, the detective confronted the owner, who nervously divulged the mask's mysterious appearance during a clearance sale. Further probing revealed a dark history tied to the mask's origin, a trail of deaths shrouded in unsolved mysteries. Forensics unearthed microscopic fibers on Catherine's fingertips, hinting at a struggle that defied conventional explanation. The fibers, a blend of human hair and an enigmatic organic substance, remained untraceable. A retired detective shed light on a chilling revelation, a ritual of soul transference linked to ancient symbols hidden within the masks. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a journal discovered in Catherine's apartment unveiled her harrowing descent into terror. Her final entry spoke of a malevolent presence, of a mask that watched her every move as she delved into its dark past. The entity within the mask sought new hosts, claiming lives in a relentless cycle of death and fear. The medical examiner's conclusion, death by extreme fear, underscored the terror that gripped Catherine in her final moments. Surveillance footage captured a haunting figure leaving her home, wearing the ominous mask with a twisted familiarity. Despite efforts to track down the mask, it vanished for months before resurfacing in a distant vintage shop, slipping into new hands unnoticed. The case, shrouded in unanswered questions, remains a chilling reminder of the inexplicable forces at play. The detective, haunted by Catherine's journal and the lingering presence of the mask, keeps vigil over the truth too bizarre for official records. In the stillness of the night, she awakens to a sense of being watched, a reminder that the mask's dark legacy endures. As the cycle of death and transference continues, the mask waits patiently to ensnare its next victim, its empty gaze fixed on a world where reality and nightmare intertwine. It lurks in the shadows, a silent predator hungry for what lies beyond mortal sight, biding its time until it finds a new host and the cycle begins anew. Story 13, the mysterious package arrived without a return label, without a tracking number. Just a plain cardboard box, slightly damp from the morning dew. It wasn't meant for Sarah Miller, even though her address was correct. The name on the box was wrong. She should have ignored it, should have left it sitting on her porch, but curiosity beckoned her. She peeled back the tape, expecting mundane contents like books or clothes. Instead, nestled inside was a VHS tape, accompanied by a single sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic rectangle in her hands, feeling its weight press against her palms. It felt heavier than it should, as if carrying the gravity of something forbidden. Her fingers traced the worn edges of the tape, exploring the imperfections in the plastic casing. The handwritten note bore the marks of urgency, every stroke etched with pressure, as if urging her to pay attention. Amidst the backdrop of her suburban neighborhood, the usual symphony of daily life played on, a distant dog barking, children's laughter in the air, the mechanical drone of a lawnmower. Unaware of the enigma that had just been delivered to her doorstep, Sarah brought the package inside, placing it on her kitchen counter. Doubt began to gnaw at her as she eyed the name on the box, Daniel Whitaker, a stranger to her. In her 4 years at the house, she had never received mail for anyone by that name. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had long since moved away to be closer to family. Curiosity warred with unease as Sarah glanced at her VCR, a relic of nostalgia she rarely used. There was something about the tape that intrigued her, a mystery shrouded in worn black plastic. Against her better judgment, she inserted the tape into the machine. Static crackled on the screen initially, gradually sharpening into focus. A dimly lit room materialized, illuminated by a solitary lamp casting shadows. The camera angle was off-kilter, as if hastily positioned. A man sat in a wooden chair, his features initially obscured by darkness. "My name is Daniel Whitaker." His voice was soft but resolute. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, which means they will find me too." Leaning forward, his face came into view, marked by exhaustion and vigilance, tired eyes, stubble over days, hair unkempt. "I didn't commit the crime, you must know that, but they have planted evidence against me, my fingerprints, my DNA, though I never laid a hand on her." As he adjusted the camera, the room revealed itself to be bare, devoid of personal touches, the temporary abode of someone prepared to flee at a moment's notice. "They have framed me," Daniel continued, his voice tinged with desperation. "The police report will claim I knew her, that we fought, that witnesses heard our arguments. None of it is true. I only saw Catherine Walsh's face when it appeared on the news, lifeless, murdered in her own home. And yet my DNA was found all over the crime scene." Detective Eliza Ramirez studied an identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth in a series that had surfaced. Each tape carried the same urgent message from Daniel Whitaker, a man officially accused in Catherine Walsh's murder, a man who had vanished without a trace since her body was discovered. Initially, the case of Catherine Walsh seemed straightforward, a young professional woman strangled in her own bedroom. No signs of forced entry, DNA evidence pointing squarely at Whitaker, whose fingerprints were already on file from a past offense. Witnesses had reported seeing a man resembling him near her home in the weeks leading up to the murder, and his phone records placed him in the vicinity that fateful night. A closed case until the tapes began to emerge. "The tapes complicate matters," Detective Ramirez spoke into her recorder, updating her case notes. "Whitaker is either orchestrating an elaborate ruse or unveiling something far more sinister." She scrutinized her evidence board, photos of Catherine Walsh alive, crime scene snapshots too grim to linger on, maps pinpointing the tape recipients' locations, and at the center, Daniel Whitaker's driver's license photograph, his eyes seeming to implore her for understanding. The investigation took a sharp turn when Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical giant with government ties. Walsh had uncovered discrepancies in their drug trial data, evidence of hidden side effects in a new medication rushing to market. She was going to testify, a former colleague confided to Ramirez, casting uneasy glances around. Catherine possessed proof that top executives were aware of the risks and chose to bury them. Her court appearance was imminent. Odd inconsistencies began to emerge. The DNA evidence seemed too meticulously placed, with illogical locations for a typical crime. Witness statements about Whitaker sounded rehearsed, echoing the same phrases across different accounts. Most unsettling were the security camera footages from nearby buildings mysteriously glitching during the crucial time frame of the murder. 3 days after the initial tape arrived, Sarah Miller received a second package. This one contained a trove of documents, clinical reports, internal communications, email exchanges, all from PharmaCorp, all bearing Catherine Walsh's digital signature, concrete evidence validating her suspicions. Detective Ramirez collaborated with other tape recipients, tracing Whitaker's breadcrumb trail. He had worked in IT security for a PharmaCorp contractor, never meeting Catherine but stumbling upon her name flagged in an abnormal security protocol he wasn't intended to access. "They were watching her," Whitaker disclosed in a subsequent tape. "I saw the surveillance orders in the system. They knew she was amassing proof. and then I found myself locked out of the network. The next day she was dead, and suddenly I was the scapegoat. The case cracked open when Sarah Miller noticed a crucial detail on her copy of the tape that others had overlooked. A reflection in a window behind Whitaker revealed a line of storage units. Collaborating with Ramirez, they pinpointed the location. Within Unit 217, they unearthed a treasure trove, Whitaker's journal outlining the conspiracy, Catherine's original evidence stash, and damning blueprints detailing Whitaker's frame-up, penned in the head of PharmaCorp Securities, handwriting a former law enforcement officer with access to evidence protocol. Justice wasn't served through a dramatic arrest, but through the methodical accumulation of irrefutable proof. 3 executives faced charges. The security head confessed, striking a deal to testify against his superiors. The tainted drug was pulled from consideration. Daniel Whitaker emerged from hiding, altered by his time as a fugitive. The charges against him were dropped, but the ordeal had left an indelible mark. Sarah Miller encountered him once as he came to reclaim his tape. They exchanged a few words on her porch, the spot where his package had first landed. "Why me?" she inquired. "Why send it to my address?" He met her gaze wearily. "The algorithm chose you. I needed individuals unconnected to Catherine or myself, people off the radar. People who might retain their faith in their judgment despite the media's accusations against me." The accused and the inadvertent observer stood in silence, pondering the fragile boundary between truth and manufactured narratives. Finally, Sarah spoke. The wrong address turned out to be precisely the right one. The VHS tapes were cataloged as evidence, tangible reminders that sometimes truth arrives in unexpected parcels, bearing unfamiliar names, awaiting a curious soul to unravel its mysteries. Story 14, the aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its creaking heating system and clanking pipes creating a familiar backdrop of ambient noise. Or so she believed until that moment of revelation. A distant voice, barely audible yet undeniably distinct, drifted through the labyrinth of vents. It wasn't the typical chatter of neighbors or the echoes of everyday life. It was a whisper, almost intimate, calling out to her by name. Intrigued and unsettled, she leaned closer, her heartbeat quickening. A sudden chill brushed past her cheek, carrying with it a soft, almost playful declaration. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the stillness of the deserted apartment, her attention fixated on the rusted vent cover forcefully removed from the wall. The forensic team meticulously combed the area, capturing every detail with their flashing cameras. The victim, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace until a pervasive odor caught the building manager's attention. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic. She claimed to hear voices through the vents, Officer Patel recounted, scanning his notes. But the building management dismissed her concerns as mere quirks of an aging infrastructure. As Shaw knelt by the vent, she observed the jagged scratches surrounding it. These marks weren't made by any tool, she observed quietly. The deep gouges in the metal seemed desperate, as if someone's fingernails had frantically clawed at the cover from within. Alina had been a beloved figure, a kindergarten teacher with a radiant smile and a thriving collection of houseplants. Her absence had cast a shadow over her students, who had crafted heartfelt cards in her absence. Her sister, the one who had reported her missing, revealed during an interview that Alina had spiraled into paranoia in the days leading up to her disappearance. Convinced that unseen eyes were watching her, voices speaking to her through the vents, Alina's fears were initially dismissed as work-induced stress. Surveying the apartment anew, Shaw noticed subtle details: a meticulously made bed, an abandoned coffee mug, a chair strategically placed beneath the vent, hinting at clandestine eavesdropping sessions. The forensic analysis unveiled startling revelations. Fibers entangled in the vent grill matched Aliner's cherished cardigan. A foreign fingerprint, distinct from Aliner's, lingered on the inside of the vent cover. Most chilling were the audio recordings extracted from Aliner's phone. Shaw listened in solitude, rain drumming on the car roof. Aliner's voice quivered in the recordings, seeking validation from the unseen presence. "If you're real, say something." A prolonged silence gave way to a faint whisper, barely audible even at maximum volume. "Aliner, dear Aliner, let me in." Delving into the building's past, a disquieting pattern emerged. Previous tenants of apartment 4B had departed prematurely, citing strange noises and unsettling experiences. One tenant had even suffered hallucinations of voices emanating from the vents due to carbon monoxide exposure. Intriguingly, the building's superintendent, Harold Weber, displayed a composed facade during questioning, attributing the phenomena to the building's age. However, his demeanor shifted imperceptibly when questioned about the prior occupants of 4B. A subtle tension gripped his features, hinting at concealed truths. The investigation took a macabre turn when a concealed access panel was unearthed in Aliner's bathroom, leading to a hidden maintenance passage threading through the walls, granting unrestricted access to the building's ventilation system. Within this clandestine passage lay a cache of belongings: a flashlight, food remnants, a water bottle, a testament to someone's covert habitation within the walls, observing, listening, whispering. A search of Weber's residence unearthed a meticulously pristine environment, save for his computer. Within its digital confines lay a disturbing trove of audio recordings, surreptitiously captured images, and a digital diary chronicling his disturbing fixation on Aliner. His entries hinted at a twisted desire for her companionship within the walls. The discovery of a storage unit registered in Weber's name yielded an array of mementos from past tenants, meticulously preserved as tokens of his voyeuristic connections. As Weber was apprehended in the dead of night, he offered no resistance, his serene countenance belying the horrors he had orchestrated. During interrogation, Weber's disturbing revelations painted a picture of a predator cloaked in the shadows of the building, manipulating his victims through whispered promises and clandestine surveillance. The chilling truth emerged that Aliner had been lured into the ventilation system, her senses dulled by sedatives, as she unwittingly navigated the labyrinthine ducts, chasing the elusive whispers that beckoned her towards a false sanctuary. Families of former tenants stepped forward, recounting tales of misplaced items and loved ones plagued by paranoia and fear. A sinister narrative unfurled, spanning years. A predator camouflaged within the structure, preying on vulnerable souls, shaping their reality through insidious whispers. At trial, Weber maintained a facade of eerie calmness as his defense attempted to attribute his actions to delusions. Yet, the prosecution's meticulous evidence dismantled his facade, exposing the calculated orchestration behind his heinous acts. The jury swiftly rendered their verdict guilty on all counts. As Weber was escorted from the courtroom, a haunting smile etched on his lips, he cryptically intoned to Shaw, "They will always hear me. The edifice retains my echoes, the whispers endure." The once inhabited apartment building now stands silent and desolate, a ghostly relic of past horrors. Despite renovations and new ownership, a pervasive unease lingers. Residents speak of phantom murmurs drifting through the vents, chilling whispers echoing in the walls. The aging infrastructure groans, the pipes rattle a symphony of secrets buried within the building's bones. It's a phenomenon dismissed as commonplace, a shared illusion that offers solace in denial. Story 15. In the dimly lit bathroom, she gently wiped away the steam clouding the mirror, revealing her own reflection. Everything seemed normal at first glance, her familiar face, her usual attire. Yet a subtle unease crept over her as she gazed longer. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement that defied her own. When she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing her every move. The enigmatic saga of Rebecca Thorne commenced with that eerie moment in her bathroom. What ensued would baffle investigators and cast a shadow over a tranquil community for years to come. Residing alone in a modest apartment nestled within a serene suburban enclave, Rebecca led a structured life. Her acquaintances portrayed her as meticulous, introverted, a woman who preferred solitude but maintained amicable relations with her neighbors. As a data analyst for a mid-sized corporation, her existence revolved around routines and precision. There was nothing about her that hinted at her becoming the focal point of one of the most perplexing criminal inquiries in recent memory. The initial peculiar incident appeared innocuous. Rebecca began noticing slight displacements of objects in her living space, nothing missing, just rearranged. A coffee mug shifted to a different shelf, books rearranged on the shelves, her toothbrush inexplicably relocated. She brushed off these anomalies as momentary lapses, mere byproducts of her prolonged hours spent immersed in spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her vision. Detective Marion Shaw was first alerted when, after enduring weeks of these disturbances, Rebecca finally reached out to the authorities. The initial evaluation yielded no tangible evidence of a crime, suggesting a potential matter for mental health services rather than law enforcement. Shaw documented the complaint but relegated it to the stack of lower priority cases. There was no concrete evidence, Shaw later attested. No signs of forced entry, no missing items, just a woman plagued by a sense of unease in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the incident involving the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent contact with the police, Rebecca vividly recounted how her reflection appeared to move independently, how she felt under constant surveillance even in solitude. This time she presented proof, footage captured by a security camera she had discreetly installed, focused on her front door. The footage unveiled something chilling that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. The grainy video depicted Rebecca departing for work in the morning, followed by an identical figure using a key to access her apartment 20 minutes later. Forensic analysts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or manipulation, but found none. The individual entering the apartment mirrored Rebecca's movements, attire, and even carried her distinctive leather bag. Nonetheless, according to time-stamped footage from her workplace's security system, Rebecca had already swiped her badge at her office building across town. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can imitate her with uncanny precision." The investigation escalated. Fingerprints within the apartment matched solely with Rebecca's, and no foreign DNA was uncovered. Neighbors reported no unusual sightings, just Rebecca's routine comings and goings. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, mentioned an odd encounter where she greeted Rebecca upon her return home one evening but received no response, which she found atypical yet not alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations within her apartment began to multiply. Food vanished from her fridge, unexplained searches surfaced on her computer, and unsettlingly she stumbled upon photographs on her phone, self-portraits resembling her but taken without her recollection. In some images, her expression appeared subtly off, the smile too wide, the gaze too intense. "I feel like I'm descending into madness," she confided in Detective Shaw during their third interaction. Or perhaps someone is orchestrating it to seem that way. A breakthrough emerged when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger exclusively infiltrated when Rebecca departed for specific prearranged activities, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, predetermined engagements with predictable durations. "Someone intimately familiar with your schedule," Shaw elucidated. "This isn't random, it's targeted surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist posited that they might be contending with a fixation case, someone fixated on becoming Rebecca, stepping into her life, conceivably aiming to supplant her entirely. Such occurrences, though rare, were documented in psychological literature. The perpetrator typically underwent a psychological rupture, fixating on a victim who embodied qualities they coveted: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The investigation honed in when Rebecca disclosed details about a former coworker, Lily Winters, who had been terminated due to escalating erratic conduct. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-dismissal, she had dispatched a series of disconcerting emails to Rebecca. "We could be identical," one message read. "At times, I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's abode. What they uncovered metamorphosed the case from unsettling to nightmarish. One chamber in Lily's residence had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls were adorned with photographs, countless snapshots of Rebecca entering her apartment, shopping, socializing, all taken unbeknownst to her. A closet harbored exact replicas of Rebecca's wardrobe, with makeup matching her preferred brands arranged on a vanity, alongside meticulous notes detailing her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most incriminating were the practice videos. Lily had recorded herself emulating Rebecca's gait, gestures, expressions. The evolution was evident: initial attempts clumsy and conspicuous, subsequent ones nearly indistinguishable from the genuine Rebecca. "She yearned to become me," Rebecca murmured upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't merely mimicking me, she was obliterating me." Forensic technicians unearthed sophisticated apparatus for forging copies of keys and replicating electronic access cards. Lily had upheld an intricate system for monitoring Rebecca's movements, including a meticulously maintained calendar forecasting her schedule. What eluded investigators was Lily's endgame. Journals recovered from her dwelling contained incoherent entries vacillating between first and third person, occasionally alluding to Rebecca as me and her within the same paragraph. The final entry sent chills down their spines. "Soon, only one of us shall remain. The stronger entity will prevail." When authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Traces of a hastened departure were evident in her apartment, drawers left ajar, certain devices missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was ushered into protective custody, relocated to a secure, undisclosed location under constant surveillance. For 3 weeks, authorities meticulously monitored every site linked to her former existence. Lily never materialized. The case took a harrowing twist when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Rebecca had been sighted entering the premises despite being on leave. Security footage corroborated the account. A figure identical to Rebecca had accessed the building using a valid ID card, proceeded to her prior workstation, and spent 40 minutes rifling through her files before departing. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca remained shielded in a secure, safe house. unable to have been present at the office. The implications crystallized. Lily hadn't fled, she had made her move. She was now assuming Rebecca's identity, seamlessly integrating into her life while the authentic Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters eluded capture. Rebecca Thorne never reclaimed her former existence, opting to forge a new identity in an undisclosed haven. Detective Shaw retains a photograph on her desk, two women strikingly resembling each other. One is Rebecca Thorne, the other is Lily Winters. Sometimes she scrutinizes their features, searching for disparities, the subtleties that could delineate one from the other. The truly disquieting aspect Shaw often imparts to rookie detectives isn't that someone may resemble you or sound like you. It's the fervor with which they aspire to become you, to the extent of effacing themselves in the process. Identity isn't just what we exhibit to the world, it's what we safeguard most zealously. And occasionally, its worth only becomes apparent when someone endeavors to pilfer it. Story 16, the weary hotel stood as a relic of bygone days, its faded facade a testament to the transient nature of its patrons. A lone traveler, drawn by circumstance to its worn entrance, was met with a peculiar warning from the clerk who handed her the key. "Just avoid the last door on the left," he murmured cryptically, his eyes betraying a hint of unease. The traveler's curiosity piqued, setting the stage for a night veiled in mystery. As darkness enveloped the hallway in a hushed embrace, she found herself drawn to the forbidden door. The handle sent a shiver through her as she reached out, the chill of metal seeping into her fingertips. To the naked eye, the door bore no distinguishing marks from its counterparts, yet a silent pulse seemed to emanate from within. Pressing her ear against the cold wood, she discerned a faint rhythm, a breath exhaled from the other side, beckoning her to unravel its enigma. Detective Morgan Reed, a seeker of truths obscured by shadows, was summoned to a grim tableau concealed behind the facade of the nondescript motel room. Crossing the threshold marked by yellow tape, she was met with the unmistakable scent of iron tinged with fear. The room itself was a canvas of duality, a pristine bathroom juxtaposed with the macabre scene playing out on the floor. A young woman lay motionless, her features frozen in a silent scream, her essence seeping into the fabric of the forgotten motel. Surveying the scene with a practiced eye, Reed noted the absence of forced entry, the lack of struggle evident on the victim's form. This was no crime of opportunity, but a calculated act, the handiwork of a predator lurking in the shadows. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern emerged, linking the victim to others who had met a similar fate in distant corners of the city. The threads of the case intertwined, leading Reed down a labyrinthine path of secrets and lies. Through the whispers of the victim's past, a portrait of a clandestine affair painted in shades of betrayal emerged. The perpetrator, a man of influence cloaked in respectability, had woven a web of deceit that ensnared those who dared to cross his path. With each revelation, the web tightened around the perpetrator, his facade crumbling under the weight of evidence stacked against him. In the sterile confines of the courtroom, justice cast its unforgiving gaze upon the man who had preyed upon the unsuspecting, his mask of indifference finally slipping to reveal the void that lay beneath. The trial marked the end of a chapter, yet for Reed, the echoes of the case lingered like a haunting melody. In the quiet moments between cases, she found herself drawn to the evidence locker, where 3 identical keys lay as silent witnesses to the horrors that had unfolded behind the doors of the forgotten motel. As the world moved on, the door on the left case faded from the headlines, relegated to the annals of true crime lore. But for Reed, the shadows cast by that fateful night refused to dissipate, a reminder that some doors once opened can never be closed, their mysteries forever etched in the recesses of the mind. Story 17. The worn plank shifted beneath her weight, whispering a secret only she could hear. Intrigued, she knelt down, her fingertips tracing the edges, sensing the hidden truth waiting to be revealed. The floor, once solid, now held a mystery within its embrace. With gentle determination, she lifted the boards, exposing a shadowy, narrow space beneath the foundation of her new dwelling. In the dim light, her eyes discerned shapes emerging from the darkness. A mattress, a solitary chair, and nestled in the corner, a weathered notebook filled with pages bearing a familiar name, her own name, inscribed repeatedly in a haunting rhythm. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah Coleman peered into the abyss beneath her home, a mixture of fear and unease clouding her gaze. It wasn't just a hidden room she had stumbled upon, it was an intrusion, a violation of her sanctuary. "Please refrain from touching anything else," Detective Reed's voice commanded, steady yet commanding, as she flicked on her flashlight, casting a revealing glow on the concealed enclave. The walls adorned with photographs, snapshots of Sarah's daily life captured in eerie detail, a shrine of obsession meticulously crafted beneath her unsuspecting feet. Sarah had acquired the quaint cottage from the estate of Walter Green, an enigmatic recluse who had passed away with no known kin. The property had lingered in solitude for months before being put up for sale, its past veiled in silence. The description touted its charm, its need for minor updates, but concealed within its walls lay a sinister narrative waiting to be unearthed. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured, her voice barely audible. "The neighbors spoke of his seclusion. I was told the basement access had been sealed off long ago. That's what the reports claimed." As the crime scene investigators arrived, the echoes of their equipment reverberated through the wooden floors, signaling the commencement of a meticulous examination. Every detail was documented, every piece of evidence cataloged, including the mattress, the chair, and the unsettling notebook extracted from the clandestine chamber. Forensic experts delved into the labyrinth of fingerprints left behind, all tracing back to Walter Green, painting a portrait of obsession that spanned years. What unsettled the investigators most was the timeline that unfolded before them. Through utility records and dated photographs, it became apparent that Walter had been shadowing Sarah for a span of at least 3 years, weaving himself into the fabric of her existence without her knowledge. He had lingered in the periphery, a ghostly presence hovering just beyond her awareness. The depth of fixation often evolves, the department psychologist remarked during a debriefing. From fantasy to reality, from admiration to possession, the hidden chamber suggests a transition towards a more direct approach. Detective Reed's inquiry took a chilling turn when she interviewed a former colleague of Walter's, a jittery man who fidgeted nervously throughout their conversation. He spoke of her at times, the man confessed, claimed she reminded him of someone else. "I brushed it off as the ramblings of an old man. I never fathomed," his words trailed off, his gaze fixed on his trembling hands. "Did he ever mention any intentions involving her?" Reed probed further. "Not explicitly, but he had this phrase he'd repeat. 'She belongs with me,' he'd say. I assumed it was mere talk." Securing a warrant to explore Walter's workplace locker, Reed uncovered a key that unlocked a path to a storage unit registered under his name. With a creaking protest, the metal door revealed a meticulously arranged replica of Sarah's former abode, her bed, her desk, her cherished belongings meticulously copied within the confines of the unit. A mannequin, adorned with a wig mirroring Sarah's own, sat in eerie stillness, a haunting reflection of what could have been. Amongst the replicated furnishings, a calendar bore witness to Walter's delusion, marking a date just a week after his sudden demise with the word "together" scrawled in crimson ink. A macabre testament to a twisted fantasy that had remained unfulfilled. Digging into Walter's past revealed a troubled history marked by institutionalization due to an infatuation with a teacher, a diagnosis of erotomania, a fixation on an unrequited love that had haunted him for years. Released into the world, he had lived a quiet existence until Sarah had unwittingly ignited the embers of his obsession. Spread across the table at the precinct, the crime scene photos painted a portrait of an unfulfilled desire, a longing that transcended rationality. In his mind, they shared a destined bond, Reed explained somberly, a bond that only he believed in. Could there have been an encounter, a chance meeting that ignited this fixation? A fellow detective pondered. Reed shook her head, her expression grave. No tangible evidence. Sometimes these obsessions require little provocation. A fleeting glance, a passing gesture enough to kindle a dormant flame. Haunted by the shadows of the past, Sarah made the decision to part ways with the house, its walls tainted by the specter of Walter's fixation. During one final walkthrough with her real estate agent, she stood in the empty space, a shiver running down her spine. "I can't shake the thought of what might have unfolded if circumstances had been different," she confessed softly. "How long would I have dwelled here, oblivious to the eyes that watched, the secrets that lay beneath my feet?" With Walter's passing, the case was officially closed, labeled as stalking with intent, a grim reminder of the dangers that linger in the unseen corners of the world. Sarah, now distanced from the haunting memories, reshaped her life, altering her routines, safeguarding her privacy with newfound vigilance. Detective Reed, a silent guardian in the shadows, monitored her from afar, a silent sentinel of the past that threatened to resurface. The cottage found new owners, a young couple unaware of its dark legacy. The hidden chamber was sealed, its secrets buried beneath layers of newfound tranquility. Life carried on, the echoes of the past fading into whispers, but for those privy to the truth, the room beneath the floor remained a somber testament to the fragility of safety, the monsters that lurk in the shadows, and the victims who narrowly evade their grasp. Story 18, the mysterious man who vanished into thin air had made the local coffee shop his sanctuary, a place where he lingered in solitude, unnoticed by most except for the familiar faces of the baristas. His presence was like a whisper in the air, fleeting and enigmatic. No one knew his name, yet he was a constant presence in the daily rhythm of the shop. Then one day, he simply didn't show up. Detective Sarah Mercer found herself drawn into the enigma surrounding the man known only as John Doe. His disappearance was as perplexing as it was unsettling. The security footage revealed his ordinary entrance, his usual order of black coffee, and his silent contemplation at the corner table. But then he vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an empty wallet and a void where his identity should have been. As Mercer delved deeper into the case, she discovered a web of mysteries woven around John Doe. His belongings revealed no clues, only more questions. The driver's license with blank spaces, the untraceable credit cards, the cryptic notebook filled with coded messages all seemed to lead to dead ends. The coffee shop itself became a focal point of the investigation, a nexus where realities intersected. The antique mirror hanging between the entrance and the restroom hallway hinted at secrets long forgotten. And as Mercer traced the man's footsteps, she realized that the building housed a dark history linked to experimental projects and quantum theories. The more she uncovered, the more the boundaries of reality blurred. Witnesses reported sightings of John Doe, reflections moving independently, and strange occurrences that defied explanation. The line between fact and fiction grew thinner until Mercer found herself standing on the precipice of something beyond comprehension. In a twist of fate, an elderly physicist named Margaret Keller emerged from the shadows, shedding light on John Doe's true identity as Daniel Weston, a brilliant mind lost to the realms of quantum mirrors and parallel realities. Weston's experiments had pushed the boundaries of science and sanity, leading him to a point of no return. The final revelation came in a shattered mirror, a shattered reality. Mercer glimpsed the truth in fragments, a glimpse of Weston watching himself, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The experiment had reached its culmination, the window between worlds closing forever. And as the case remained unsolved, the coffee shop faded into memory, a place where the line between the known and the unknown blurred. Mercer, haunted by the echoes of a man who defied existence, found solace in her own reflections, writing feverishly in a notebook that mirrored Weston's own. The tale of the man who slipped through the cracks of reality lingered like a whisper in the wind, a mystery that would forever elude explanation. And as the echoes of the past faded into silence, the truth remained hidden, waiting to be unraveled by those brave enough to peer beyond the veil of the ordinary. Story 19, the ancient library faced its fate of demolition. The workers diligently carried out their tasks, nearing the completion of dismantling the structure when a peculiar discovery halted their progress. Among the dusty bookshelves, a laborer stumbled upon a hidden latch concealed from view. With a gentle push, a soft click echoed through the room as the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow passage leading to an unseen chamber. The air within was heavy, thick with the weight of time, untouched by human hands for decades. The room was bare, devoid of furniture save for a solitary chair stationed at its center, firmly bolted to the floor. Etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message lingered, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly contacted the authorities, setting in motion a chain of events that would unravel a mystery shrouded in darkness. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, arrived at the scene to find a setting unlike any he had encountered before. Standing in the doorway of the hidden chamber, his flashlight pierced the shadows, casting eerie shapes upon the walls covered in the unsettling message. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded, his voice resonating in the confined space. "No one disturbs a thing until forensics completes their examination." The background of the building added layers of intrigue to the unfolding narrative. Once owned by the influential Harrington family, the library had been bequeathed to the public following the mysterious disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, leaving behind only her abandoned car near the woods, Rebecca's fate remained a haunting enigma. Despite exhaustive searches and inquiries, the truth behind her disappearance eluded all who sought it. The prevailing belief suggested she had chosen to vanish of her own volition, yet her family vehemently rejected this notion, convinced of a darker reality. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they uncovered traces of hair and fibers embedded in the aged chair. The scratches on the walls, barely visible beneath layers of dust, yielded minute samples of blood and skin cells, indicating a young female presence. "This chair was designed for restraint," remarked the forensic analyst, gesturing towards the weathered leather straps and bolt holes. "Someone endured great struggle here." Detective Walsh delved into the history of the Harrington family, sensing a connection between the library's donation and Rebecca's disappearance. An unsettling revelation emerged: the contractor responsible for installing the bookshelf had ties to Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family patriarch. Financial records hinted at unusual payments to the contractor, far exceeding standard renovation expenses. Former library staff expressed shock at the hidden room's existence, with one elderly librarian recalling Maxwell's peculiar insistence on preserving that section during renovations, citing its historical significance. The investigation took a grim turn when DNA analysis confirmed the genetic material in the hidden chamber matched Rebecca's samples. The chilling realization dawned Rebecca had not fled. She had been imprisoned behind the secret passage, potentially by a member of her own family. Armed with a search warrant, detectives scoured the Harrington estate, unearthing a leather-bound journal in Maxwell's study. The journal chronicled months of disturbing entries, revealing Maxwell's twisted fixation on his niece. The final entry bore a sinister declaration. She threatened exposure. I could not allow it. The room will serve its purpose until she complies. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Maxwell's veneer of innocence crumbled. Admitting to the heinous act, he confessed to silencing Rebecca to protect the family's reputation. In a tragic sequence of events, Maxwell had ensnared Rebecca within the hidden chamber, leading to her untimely demise. The excavation beneath the chamber's floor unearthed Rebecca's skeletal remains, adorned with the silver bracelet gifted by her parents. The Harrington family stood witness to Maxwell's sentencing, grappling with the weight of truth and justice long overdue. Rebecca's mother clutched the recovered bracelet, a poignant relic of her daughter's stolen life. The library, once slated for destruction, transformed into a memorial of remembrance and reckoning. Locals paid homage with bouquets at the entrance, honoring the life extinguished unjustly and the revelation that had lurked behind a bookshelf, waiting to be unveiled. In a bittersweet twist, it was Rebecca's haunting message etched on the walls, "I am still here," that ensured her eternal presence, a beacon of justice prevailing, even in the darkest of shadows. Story 20. Once upon a time, a gentle flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, a fleeting anomaly in the stillness of the night. The mother, drowsy and half awake, brushed it off as mere interference from the world outside. Yet as the air crackled with static, a soft voice, barely a whisper, pierced through the silence, urging SHHH, go back to sleep. A chill ran down her spine, her heartbeat quickening as she stumbled towards her son's room, a primal fear gripping her heart. But as she flung open the door, her eyes met an empty crib, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the room. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly was a forsaken stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed upon her in a haunting gaze. Rebecca's anguished screams echoed through the night, reverberating off the walls until her voice grew hoarse and raw. The neighbors, stirred from their slumber, dialed emergency services, their concern palpable in the quiet hours before dawn. When the authorities arrived, they found Rebecca, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest, a broken wail escaping her lips as she rocked back and forth on the nursery floor. Samuel, her precious 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a trace, leaving only questions in his wake. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery, a puzzle with missing pieces that refused to fit together. No signs of forced entry marred the pristine facade of the home, the security system standing sentinel throughout the night, undisturbed. The baby monitor footage, once a silent observer, now held a cryptic message and a voice that defied explanation. How could an intruder slip in undetected, plucking a child from his slumber, leaving behind nothing but a solitary toy as a cruel reminder of their presence? Suspicions turned towards Rebecca, her fragile state of mind scrutinized under the harsh light of interrogation. Her husband, Daniel, absent during the harrowing events, returned to a world fractured by uncertainty. Their fractured relationship, strained by the weight of parenthood and unspoken truths, cast a shadow over their grief-stricken home. Medical records hinted at Rebecca's struggles with postpartum depression, painting her as a portrait of fragility in the face of tragedy. A glimmer of hope sparked in the darkness when forensic experts uncovered microscopic fibers on the nursery windowsill, foreign to the household tapestry. These fibers, delicate as spider silk, whispered of a clandestine entry, a breach from the outside world into the sanctuary of the nursery. The focus shifted, tracing the invisible thread of a mystery unraveling before their eyes. Security footage from neighboring homes unveiled a shadowy figure, a specter haunting the night with purposeful steps. A lone footprint in the garden soil bore the imprint of a specialized boot, worn by those well-versed in the art of climbing and stealth. Rebecca, once the target of suspicion, now stood in the shadows as new truths came to light. Daniel, with his hands stained by secrets, returned to a house divided, his presence a specter of guilt looming over the fractured family. His newfound hobby of rock climbing, a guise for hidden desires, raised eyebrows among the investigators. Financial records whispered of a darker motive, a web of lies spun with meticulous care. A second family, hidden in plain sight, painted a portrait of a man consumed by greed and betrayal. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the baby monitor emerged as a silent witness to the truth. Hacked and manipulated, its digital eyes bore witness to a conspiracy woven with deceit. The voice that had whispered through the darkness was but a pawn in a game of shadows and whispers. In a dimly lit basement, the truth lay waiting to be uncovered. Samuel, alive and unharmed, cradled in the arms of a woman named Elaine, her eyes vacant and haunted by the ghosts of the past. The tangled web of relationships unraveled, revealing a tale of loss, obsession, and misplaced love. Daniel and Elaine, bound by a shared darkness, faced the harsh light of justice as the courtroom held its breath. The enhanced audio from the baby monitor echoed through the chamber, a haunting melody of betrayal and deceit. The jury's verdict, swift and decisive, sealed their fate in a symphony of justice. Rebecca, her heart heavy with the weight of the past, carried on, a survivor in a world marred by shadows. Samuel, innocent and unknowing, would grow up shielded from the echoes of that fateful night, his laughter a beacon of hope in a world tainted by darkness. The stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to the truth, remained locked away in a box, its glassy eyes a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the night. Rebecca, haunted by the memories that lingered, found solace in the quiet moments, the darkness a canvas for her healing heart. The baby monitor, a sentinel of truth in a world of shadows, whispered its silent vigil, a guardian of innocence in a world tainted by betrayal. And as the night fell, a sense of peace washed over the world, a lullaby of justice and redemption weaving its way through the darkness, soothing troubled souls to rest. Story 21, The Enigmatic Dollhouse. She always avoided the attic, finding it unsettling, but when a storm caused a leak in the roof, she had no choice but to venture up there. The attic was a forgotten realm, cloaked in dust and cobwebs. Amid the shadows in the farthest corner sat an old dollhouse. It was a curious sight, eerily detailed, with tiny furniture meticulously arranged. However, as she peered inside, a sense of unease gripped her. The figures within were not dolls, but intricately hand-carved replicas of her own family. Each tiny figure mirrored her family members' exact positions as they sat downstairs, except for one glaring difference. The figure meant to represent her was not seated, but stood by the attic door. Rebecca Morgan hesitantly ran her finger across the dollhouse roof, tracing the spot where the small wooden figure stood. A chill coursed through her body, unrelated to the cold draft whispering through the attic. The dollhouse's presence was inexplicable. This wasn't her childhood home, but a rental property her family had recently moved into. The unsettling discovery prompted Rebecca to contact law enforcement in a state of distress. Officers arrived at the suburban residence to find the family gathered in the living room, reluctant to return upstairs. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially dismissed their concerns as a prank or a product of their adjustment to a new home. However, Detective Harmon's skepticism wavered upon observing the intricate details of the dollhouse. Each miniature figurine captured unique traits of the family members: the father's receding hairline, the son's hoodie, even the mother's small birthmark. The situation took a darker turn when forensic teams uncovered fingerprints on the dollhouse that did not match any family member. Further examination revealed microscopic cameras embedded in the figure's eyes, connected to a hidden recording system beneath the dollhouse. The investigation unveiled a disturbing revelation. The miniature figures' positions did not merely reflect the family's current activities, but mirrored their past movements, indicating someone had been observing them closely over an extended period. Detective Harmon remarked, "We were dealing with far more than mere stalking. The level of obsession displayed by the perpetrator was unprecedented." A breakthrough came with the discovery of a concealed basement entrance behind a pantry wall. Inside, investigators found evidence of someone living there before the Morgan family's arrival. Food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag suggested prolonged occupancy beneath the unsuspecting family. The absence of forced entry perplexed investigators. Property records revealed the house had stood vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans moved in. Interviews with neighbors yielded little insight, except for a mention of occasional lights in the vacant house by an elderly resident. Digital forensics led investigators to an apartment across town, belonging to Martin Wells, the son of the previous homeowners. The apartment unveiled a chilling setup, a network of surveillance, and a collection of photographs and journals detailing the lives of various families in the area. Wells' obsession with control became evident as the extent of his surveillance unfolded. During interrogation, Wells remained unnervingly composed, attributing his actions to a need to safeguard his childhood home. His twisted reasoning revolved around ensuring the occupants respected the property he considered his own. A psychological evaluation portrayed a complex delusion rooted in a desire for possession and control. The Morgans chose never to return to the house, haunted by the realization that their lives had been scrutinized and manipulated. Wells faced charges for stalking, invasion of privacy, and illegal surveillance, prompting a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws. The case shed light on the violation endured by the Morgan family and raised questions regarding the responsibilities of property agents. Wells' meticulous surveillance operation, spanning multiple properties, stunned criminologists. The Morgans sought solace in a new home, yet the lingering fear of being watched persisted. Rebecca, in her victim impact statement, shared her ongoing unease and the persistent feeling of being monitored. She removed all remnants of dollhouses and miniatures from their new residence, haunted by the possibility of undiscovered surveillance. The enigma of the dollhouse and its sinister creator left a lasting mark on the family, reminding them that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Story 22. The new homeowners believed the crackling intercom was just an odd quirk of their old Victorian manor. It whispered secrets of the past, long forgotten but never truly silenced. Late one night, curiosity got the best of the husband. He pressed the button, and a haunting whisper crept through the speaker, asking, "Why did you come back?" His hands trembled as his wife, taken aback, softly denied ever speaking those words. Daniel and Meredith Parker had fallen in love with the charm of the manor, nestled among ancient oak trees. The weathered exterior held stories untold, while the modern interior whispered of a bygone era. The vintage intercom, a relic connecting every room, had drawn them in with its mysterious allure. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, the gravel murmuring beneath her tires. The call had hinted at a break-in, but the unspoken tension in the dispatcher's voice hinted at deeper truths. Daniel, pale in the dim light, led her through the grand foyer, recounting the eerie progression of whispers through the intercom that had unsettled their nights. In the living room, Meredith's grip on her untouched mug betrayed her unease. She revealed the discovery behind a kitchen wall, a hidden journal belonging to Alina, the previous owner. The journal spoke of fear and suspicion towards her husband Vincent, ending abruptly 30 years prior. The investigation unveiled the dark tale of Vincent and Alina Blackwood. Vincent, now living in a care facility, confessed to silencing Alina's voice forever. He had spun a web of deceit, convincing the world she had left him. But Alina's voice refused to be silenced, echoing through the intercom from beyond the grave. Vincent's chilling confession laid bare the truth of Alina's fate, buried beneath the garden shed for decades. The wedding band inscribed with her name revealed a love twisted by betrayal and violence. Vincent's meticulously crafted facade crumbled as justice finally caught up with him. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the house's history, bid farewell after a somber memorial for Alina. The garden, now a place of peace, held the echoes of her lost voice. The intercom, a relic of the past, was removed by the new owners, who heard whispers amidst the static during its dismantling. Detective Reeves, closing the case file on the Blackwood tragedy, pondered the house's silent witness to the past. Known as the house that answered back, it stood as a reminder that some secrets refused to stay buried. As she drove by the property, she listened for whispers on the wind, a ghostly echo of a voice seeking justice in the stillness of the night. Story 23. The ancient container lay hidden beneath layers of clutter in the attic, a forgotten time capsule left behind by the previous occupants of the house. Among its contents were faded snapshots capturing moments of celebration and togetherness, harmless scenes of joy, until she reached the final picture. In that snapshot, taken within her own living room, sat a family she did not recognize. The familiarity of the setting was eerie, the same furniture, the same decor. But the family in the photograph was a puzzle, their smiles masking the presence of a figure lurking in the shadows behind them. A figure watching, unseen yet undeniably present. Rebecca felt a shiver run down her spine as she examined the photograph. Her hands quivered slightly, causing the edges of the picture to tremble. The family in the image, a woman with golden locks, a man with thick-rimmed glasses, and two children beamed at the camera, oblivious to the ominous silhouette lingering nearby. Frozen in a moment of bliss, unaware of the lurking danger that loomed near. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca carried the photo with her, feeling the weight of the house press in on her. Since moving in 4 months prior, the vast emptiness of the place had always felt oppressive, but now it felt stifling. Placing the photograph on the kitchen counter, she gazed at it under the harsh glow of the fluorescent light. The parallels were uncanny, the architecture, the decor, unmistakably her home, yet inhabited by strangers. A weathered detective, clad in a leather jacket weathered by years of investigations, arrived on the scene. Detective Morgan's keen eyes scanned the photograph with precision, his gloved finger tracing the edges. "What do you know about the previous owners, the Nelsons?" he inquired, his voice a low rumble. "Not much," Rebecca confessed. "They had already moved out when I bought the house." Morgan nodded, his expression inscrutable. "May I take this for further investigation? Our team might be able to identify the family in the photo." The inquiry began quietly, unraveling the history of the house's past inhabitants. The Nelsons had acquired the property from the Crawfords, who had mysteriously vanished after a year of residence. Before them, the Mornos had occupied the house for nearly a decade. Detective Morgan meticulously combed through records, interviewed former neighbors, and pieced together a timeline of occupants. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A retired mail carrier identified the family in the photograph as the Sutherlands. They lived there briefly before vanishing without a trace, he revealed. Mail piled up unnoticed until their sudden disappearance raised suspicions. The Sutherlands had evaporated into thin air, leaving behind no breadcrumbs of their departure. Forensic analysis dated the photograph to 15 years prior, pinpointing anomalies that hinted at a staged setting. The camera had been triggered by a timer, capturing the family in a moment of bliss, oblivious to the sinister presence in their midst. But who was the shadowy figure in the hallway, watching with intent focus? Enhanced imaging unveiled more details about the mysterious observer, a tall male figure shrouded in darkness, his face obscured but his presence palpable. He seemed to belong there, a silent sentinel watching over the house. Detective Morgan uncovered a chilling pattern of families disappearing after precisely 1 year of residency, a haunting cycle that repeated itself over decades. Delving into historical records, the detective unearthed the origins of the house, a creation of a renowned architect, overshadowed by the mysterious disappearance of the project manager near completion. Samuel Whitfield, the man who took over and completed the construction, bore a striking resemblance to the figure in the photograph. However, records indicated that Whitfield had perished in a tragic accident shortly after the house was finished. His body never recovered. The investigation turned towards the basement, where ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath the concrete floor. As the jackhammers broke through, a putrid odor filled the air. Beneath layers of soil and concrete, the missing families were discovered, perfectly preserved in their final moments. Among their belongings was a camera, identical to the one that had captured the haunting photograph in the attic. The house was cordoned off as a crime scene, sealing off its chilling secrets. Rebecca would never return, her sanctuary tainted by the shadows of the past. As investigators combed through the evidence, they stumbled upon a hidden crawlspace in the attic, concealing a makeshift living quarters with a journal documenting the families that had resided in the house. The final entry, dated just days prior, sent chills down their spines. "The new occupant is different. She discovered my photograph too soon. I must expedite my plans." Under police protection, Rebecca sought refuge in a hotel, but even there, the specter of the house haunted her. In the dead of night, a phone call shattered the silence, the only sound a raspy breath on the line, followed by the mechanical click of a Polaroid camera. The investigation lingered. The house stood silent and foreboding, its mysteries shrouded in darkness and unanswered questions. Samuel Whitfield's fate remained a mystery, his presence a specter that loomed over the house. Some believed he perished long ago, while others speculated he vanished, moving on to repeat his dark cycle in a new abode. And somewhere in the shadows, new photographs developed, capturing unsuspecting families in their most vulnerable moments. The only certainty was that those who delved into the enigma of the man in the photograph found themselves under his watchful gaze. a silent witness to his unfathomable deeds. Story 24, the village kept silent about the dwelling on the outskirts of the woods. It stood solitary, its windows darkened, its veranda drooping with the weight of time. No one laid claim to it. No one could recall who erected it. Yet when a cluster of adventurers strayed too close, they witnessed something peculiar, names etched into the wooden panels, carved deep like omens. At the end of the roster, fresh and untouched, was a name unfamiliar to any of them. Until one of them murmured, voice quivering, "That's mine." The alert came in the dead of night. Dispatch logged it as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the head explorer who stumbled upon his name carved into the deserted abode. The responding officers anticipated nothing beyond juvenile mischief, perhaps a jest among pals. But what they encountered defied all logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as twilight descended over the woods. The beam of her flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing the weathered front of the structure. The names 27 in total ran vertically down the eastern wall. Some had faded with years, nearly indiscernible against the gray timber. Others remained sharp, as if freshly etched. And at the base, Mason Wright, the incision still showing traces of recent sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason asserted, his breath forming mist in the cold air. "I can't fathom how anyone would know my name." The inquiry commenced with background checks on each listed name. The findings sent shivers down the spines of the detective team. Each name belonged to an individual reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases had gone cold, others remained active, but all shared a chilling similarity: the individuals had vanished while hiking solo. Forensic experts photographed each engraving, documenting the varying depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, aligned with a missing person case from 37 years earlier. The case files recounted a young woman who ventured into those woods and never returned. Search parties unearthed naught but a lone hiking boot by a stream. Detective Keller extensively interviewed Mason. His account remained unwavering. He had no ties to the area beyond this hiking excursion with 4 college friends. They had selected the trail randomly, based on an online suggestion. Nothing in his background linked him to any of the other names on the wall. The focus of the investigation shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, provided photographs taken during their hike. Upon scrutiny, analysts noticed something unsettling: a blurred figure lurking in the backdrop of 3 separate photos. The silhouette resembled a tall, slender man, always partly obscured by trees. "We encountered no one else on the trail," Emily insisted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a search of the interior of the house. The edifice appeared forsaken. Dust blanketed every surface. Furniture lay shattered and strewn. Yet in the basement, officers stumbled upon a disturbing sight. Personal effects belonging to the missing hikers lay arranged neatly on wooden shelves. Watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each item labeled with a corresponding name from the wall outside. The forensic team worked meticulously, cataloging every article. Beneath ultraviolet light, bloodstains emerged on the concrete floor, stains scrubbed in vain over the years. Ground-penetrating radar revealed no bodies buried beneath the house, yet cadaver dogs repeatedly signaled near the rear of the property, where the woods thickened. As the investigation escalated, Detective Keller noted peculiar behavior from Mason Wright. He began reporting strange incidents: whispers outside his flat, footprints in fresh snow leading to his door but not away, figures observing from the street. The department assigned an officer to guard him, but Mason grew increasingly paranoid. The breakthrough arrived when researchers unearthed land records buried in county archives. The house had been owned by a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood. Neighbors seldom glimpsed him, recounting brief encounters with an unsettlingly tall, gaunt man who shunned conversation. Blackwood vanished without a trace 15 years ago, his disappearance left uninvestigated. Detective Keller secured a warrant to delve deeper into the surrounding forest. The search party stumbled upon a network of rudimentary hunting blinds, strategically positioned along popular hiking trails. Inside one, they found a journal detailing meticulous observations, descriptions of hikers, their paths, gear, and routines. The handwriting matched samples from Victor Blackwood's scant existing documents. The journal entries grew increasingly disturbing over time. Early pages delineated hunting methods for animals. Later entries portrayed humans as prey, their behaviors, weaknesses, and methods for their acquisition. The final pages contained elaborate accounts of stalking each victim on the wall, including intricate descriptions of how he selected his prey. The manhunt for Blackwood mobilized across multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scoured the woods. Tactical teams combed every crevice and cavern, yet the suspect remained elusive. Mason Wright ceased answering his phone. Officers dispatched to his apartment found the door ajar, the rooms vacant. On his bedroom wall, freshly carved, was a single inscription: "The hunter becomes the hunted." The search for Mason persisted for weeks to no avail. Then, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's house, forensic technicians made a horrifying discovery. Concealed behind a false wall in the basement, they unearthed a small workshop housing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a newly carved piece of timber bearing a fresh name not yet affixed to the exterior wall. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the head forensic technician who had processed the house during the initial investigation. The technician had called in sick that morning and was unreachable by phone. Authorities established a continuous surveillance perimeter around the house. Camera systems recorded every approach. Motion sensors monitored for intrusions. The trap was set. 3 nights later, sensors triggered an alert. Security footage captured a figure emerging from the forest, impossibly tall and slender, moving with unnatural elegance. The figure advanced towards the house directly, seemingly unfazed by the surveillance. As tactical teams closed in, the cameras briefly lost connection. When the system reconnected, the figure had vanished. The house remains under constant surveillance to this day. Mason Wright and the forensic technician were never located. The investigation persists, with fresh resources allocated as similar disappearances are reported in other wooded regions. The names on the wall have become a legend among law enforcement officers. Some refuse to utter them aloud, others steer clear of the case entirely, and local hikers now steer clear of the house, fearful that mentioning it might somehow add their names to that dreadful list, the names unspoken. Story 25. In the quiet of a suburban neighborhood, a mysterious key arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope, its origins shrouded in secrecy. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, felt a strange familiarity with the worn brass key, despite not recognizing it. As she tried it in every lock she owned, not a single one turned, signaling that it belonged to something unknown. However, when she placed it on her coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime, a sound that had not been heard in years due to the clock's broken state. Puzzled by this strange occurrence, Sarah reported it to the authorities, setting off a chain of events that would unravel a chilling mystery hidden within the seemingly ordinary neighborhood. The responding officer initially dismissed Sarah's concerns, attributing the key's arrival to a possible mistake, but Sarah's intuition whispered of something darker lurking beneath the surface. Reluctantly, the officer took the key as evidence, unaware of the sinister path it would lead them down. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen sense for cases with deeper layers, received the file. The brass key sat on his desk, unassuming yet radiating an unsettling aura that pricked at his instincts. Delving into Sarah's background revealed no hint of wrongdoing. A retired teacher with a quiet life, nothing out of the ordinary. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key except Sarah's, and the envelope offered no clues save for a generic postmark. It was a breakthrough when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique pattern through the department database, unearthing a connection to a cold case from years past. The key matched one found at a storage unit linked to disturbing evidence, a place where unspeakable acts had taken place, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and unsolved mysteries. With renewed fervor, Harmon delved into the case files, uncovering a web of darkness that had long evaded justice. The key pointed to a sinister figure, Harold Jenkins, a shadowy presence who had once lived nearby, now a phantom whose trail had grown cold. Jenkins' past revealed a patchwork of transient moves, unexplained absences, and a facade of normalcy that masked his true nature. As the investigation deepened, a chilling revelation emerged. The key was not just a random object sent to Sarah. It was a macabre invitation, a sinister token meant to draw her into Jenkins' twisted world. Fear gripped the community as the manhunt intensified, with Jenkins eluding capture, leaving behind a trail of terror and unanswered questions. The hunt for Jenkins led investigators to a secluded cabin, where a gruesome discovery awaited beneath the floorboards, a hidden room filled with identical keys, each bearing a name and a date, a silent testament to the lives Jenkins had claimed as his own. The horror only deepened as forensic teams unearthed human remains buried in the vicinity, painting a grim picture of the extent of Jenkins' depravity. Amidst the chaos, Sarah found herself at the center of a nightmare she could never have imagined. With round-the-clock protection, she grappled with the realization that she had unknowingly crossed paths with a monster in human form. The manhunt culminated in a dramatic confrontation, culminating in Jenkins' tragic end, but not before he left behind a chilling message for Sarah, a reminder that he had been watching, waiting for her to acknowledge the darkness that dwelled within him. As the community grappled with the aftermath of Jenkins' reign of terror, experts delved into his writings, seeking to understand the mind of a predator who had hidden in plain sight. The keys, silent witnesses to unspeakable horrors, served as a stark reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a facade of normalcy. And so, the story of the mysterious key and the man known as the Keymaster faded into memory, leaving behind a legacy of fear and a cautionary tale of the darkness that can reside in the most unexpected places. Story 26. In the attic of their new Victorian house, Sarah and Michael stumbled upon a hidden treasure, a porcelain doll with wide, unblinking blue eyes nestled beneath a tattered blanket. Despite its delicate and old appearance, they brushed it off as just another forgotten antique, sharing a laugh at the odd find. Little did they know that doll would soon weave itself into their lives in ways unimaginable. As night fell and they retired to bed, an unsettling feeling crept over them. The air grew heavy, the silence thick, setting an eerie atmosphere within the house. And when morning broke, the doll was no longer perched in the attic where they had found it. Instead, it now sat ominously at the foot of their bed, its unchanging gaze fixed upon them. Sarah and Michael, drawn to the historical allure of their new home despite whispers of its troubled past, found themselves unwittingly entangled in a web of mystery and dread. Detective Rachel Winters, a seasoned investigator, was called to the scene on a crisp autumn morning where a chilling discovery awaited her. In the master bedroom, the female victim lay in a macabre pose, her limbs unnaturally bent, eyes wide with fear. A few steps away, the male victim appeared as if he had been attempting to flee from an unseen terror. The scene was meticulously arranged, devoid of any signs of forced entry or struggle beyond the haunting final moments. Observing the scene with a keen eye, Detective Winters noted the deliberate positioning of the victims, likening the female's eerie pose to that of a doll plucked from a display. As the investigation unfolded, strange details emerged, painting a picture of inexplicable horror. Neighbors recounted glimpses of shadows and eerie sounds emanating from the empty house at odd hours, adding layers of unease to the already perplexing case. Forensic analysis uncovered traces of vintage fabrics commonly used in antique doll clothing, clustered around the victims and the enigmatic attic space. More perplexing still was the absence of any physical evidence linking an intruder to the crime. The lack of fingerprints, foreign DNA, or footprints confounded even the most seasoned investigators. It was as though the perpetrator had never truly been present in the physical realm. Delving into the property's dark past, Detective Winters unearthed a harrowing pattern of unexplained deaths stretching back over 6 decades. Each previous owner had met a mysterious end, with reports of uncanny occurrences and inexplicable phenomena haunting the halls of the house. One particular clue led the investigation down a chilling path, a newspaper clipping detailing the tragic demise of a dollmaker's daughter within the very walls of the house. The dollmaker, suspected of dark practices and never brought to justice, had crafted a doll in his daughter's likeness, rumored to hold a malevolent spirit within. As the detective pieced together the eerie puzzle, a connection emerged among the victims. They had all made alterations to the attic, unknowingly disturbing a sinister force lying dormant within the confines of the house. Old photographs hidden within the attic revealed the sinister truth: a doll, identical to the one discovered by Sarah and Michael, seemingly moving of its own volition in the images. Infrared scans unveiled a chilling trail of invisible handprints leading from the attic to the master bedroom, accompanied by an enigmatic residue of porcelain dust and unidentifiable organic matter. The revelation of the dollmaker's dark rituals and the binding of spirits to objects shed light on the malevolent presence that loomed over the house. Despite her best efforts, Detective Winters hit a dead end as conventional explanations crumbled in the face of the inexplicable. With no suspects in sight and the case growing colder by the day, the truth remained elusive, shrouded in a veil of mystery and dread. The detective's final encounter with the doll marked a turning point in the investigation. As the doll vanished from police custody without a trace, leaving behind a disoriented but unharmed detective and a void of memories, the house's dark legacy continued to cast a shadow over all who crossed its threshold. The house, tainted by its grim history, changed hands once more, its unsettling reputation driving down its value despite its architectural grandeur. The new owners, wary of the ominous whispers surrounding the attic, chose to leave it undisturbed, unaware of the unseen forces that lurked within. And so the doll's legacy lived on in whispered tales and fleeting shadows, a reminder of the dark secrets that lay hidden within the walls of the house. Detective Winters, haunted by the unsolved case, retired early, taking with her a chilling photograph of the dollmaker and his creations, sealing it away as a silent testament to the horrors she had witnessed. Though the attic remained silent and undisturbed on quiet nights, a faint shadow would dance behind the attic window, accompanied by the soft laughter of a child echoing through the stillness, a haunting reminder of the darkness that dwelled within the house's walls, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to listen. Story 27. The apartment had sat in silence for months, a quiet observer of time passing by. When the new tenants crossed its threshold, they carried with them no expectations, only a readiness to uncover the secrets hidden within its walls, perhaps just dust, maybe some remnants of lives once lived. Yet a single door stood defiant, refusing to yield to their gentle nudges. It was a closet, shrouded in mystery, locked from within as if guarding a forbidden truth. With a determined push, the landlord broke the stubborn lock, anticipating mundane discoveries of old belongings left behind. But what greeted them was far from ordinary. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, jagged lines that spoke of desperation and fear. And nestled in the corner, a relic of the past, a weathered flip phone, its screen illuminated by a single unread message, a ghostly presence in the dim room. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator accustomed to the darkness that lurked in human hearts, felt a shiver trace down her spine at the sight before her. It wasn't the absence of blood or overt violence that unsettled her, but the haunting implications of those frantic scratch marks, a silent plea for help, a battle against the confines of that cramped space. "We need forensics now," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, whose camera shutter clicked in rhythm with the echoes of the past. "And fetch me the records of the ones who came before." The message on the phone, stark against the silence that enveloped the room, whispered chilling words, "I know what you did." The landlord, a man of nervous disposition with perpetually moist palms, stammered about the previous tenant, a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid dues. "Kept to herself, quiet type," he muttered, eyes darting everywhere but towards the closet. "No trouble at all." As forensic analysis unveiled a tale woven in blood and secrets, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Emma Caldwell, a name etched in the shadows of the apartment, had vanished at the age of 28, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and haunting whispers. The closet, a chamber of confinement, spoke volumes of Emma's struggle for survival. Her absence was a presence in itself, unopened mail, a cold coffee mug, a bed meticulously made, a life abruptly interrupted. As the investigation delved deeper, a web of connections emerged. Phone calls left unanswered, a mysterious boyfriend shrouded in ambiguity, and an unknown number that echoed in the void left by Emma's disappearance. Surveillance footage, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, captured a shadow slipping into the night, an enigmatic figure whose identity remained veiled in darkness, yet whose presence loomed large in the shadows of the past. The revelation of Derek Mercer's fingerprints on the closet doorknob shattered the illusion of his demise, unraveling a tapestry of deceit woven with threads of deception and malice. "He faked his death," Shaw murmured, her gaze fixed on the damning evidence before her. "But why, and what ties him to Emma's fate?" The unknown DNA sample led them to another missing soul, Lynette Porter, a ghost of the past whose voice echoed in the silence of the apartment. Her tale intertwined with Emma's, a tragic symphony of captivity and despair. As the pieces of the puzzle interlocked, a sinister picture emerged. Derek Mercer, a phantom in the night, orchestrated a macabre dance of control and torment, his victims mere pawns in a twisted game of domination. The manhunt that followed stretched across boundaries, a relentless pursuit of a shadow that eluded the grasp of justice. But as the net closed in, Mercer's facade of normalcy crumbled, revealing a darkness that defied comprehension. In a remote property, a chamber of horrors awaited, where Lynette Porter's voice whispered of captivity and terror, a mirror to Emma's own ordeal. He made me watch, her voice quivered, eyes hollow with the weight of unspeakable horrors. He wanted me to learn the price of defiance. The evidence mounted, a damning testament to Mercer's depravity journals stained with obsession, photographs frozen in time, and videos that captured the horror of Emma's final moments. The trial, a reckoning with the shadows that danced in Mercer's wake, laid bare the extent of his malevolence. A life sentence without parole was the verdict, a final chapter in a saga of darkness and despair. As Mercer's gaze met the eyes of his victims, a chilling smile played on his lips, a silent acknowledgement of a truth known only to him, a truth that lingered in the shadows beyond the reach of justice. And as the courtroom echoed with the weight of their words, Lynette Porter stood tall, a beacon of resilience in a sea of darkness. While he rots in his cell, she declared, her voice unwavering, I'll be standing in the light. The echoes of the past lingered in the air, a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. Detective Shaw, a guardian of shadows, kept the door from Emma's apartment as a silent vigil, a testament to the strength that thrives in the face of darkness, a beacon of hope in the night.